One day, a gate opened in the sky, unexpectedly, and monsters came to Earth through it. But along with these monsters, there are those who are able to defeat these demons with their power. These creatures from another world who came to Earth and interfered in people's lives were called celestials. People immediately received a message. They were informed that the state was preparing for such situations from the very beginning. People were asked not to leave their homes under any circumstances, to lock their doors and not to go outside, because rescuers would soon appear. It was after that day that ordinary people began to develop incredible abilities, just like celestials. The human will to live was as strong as the endurance of monsters. People had enormous power in their hands to protect themselves from these demons, which meant that anyone in this world could take power into their own hands. The source of life and strength of the celestials was the divine foundation. The divine foundation is divided into three types. The first being possessed by those who can use the power of heaven and earth, the heavenly foundation. The second type is possessed by those who control the energy of wood, fire, earth, iron, and water. They form the entire surface world, the earthly basis. The third type is possessed by those who know how to control the human body with the help of the energy of the sun, moon, and yin-yang, the human basis. And finally, the foundation, which refers neither to heaven nor earth and does not even refer to the human foundation. Creatures from this space are too unpredictable, and there are many more problems with them. Suddenly, a young man with a weapon in his hand appeared, looking like he had recently taken an elixir. As ridiculous as it may sound, his elixir was nicotine, and as a result, he received hyperstimulation of the central nervous system. This increased the release of dopamine and adrenaline, and it began to stimulate his abilities. When the monster saw him, it immediately felt the strength of this guy. It began to scream loudly and prepare to attack. This guy's name is Brian, and he decided not to wait for the monster to attack, and he took a decisive first step. An aggressive and brutal battle began, and Brian struck the first blow and made the monster feel pain. Of course, this will not be enough for a total victory, but it already characterizes the young man's abilities. The basis of such beings is not heavenly power or earthly power. It is not even about human power. They are too unpredictable and are called a catastrophe. We can say that they are the embodiment of chaos in its purest form. Their basis cannot be seen with the eyes alone. This is a global, incomprehensible basis. Even the most experienced will have problems with creatures with this basis in the future. In this world, people have gained strength from the divine basis. On the contrary, the non-gods were stronger than them due to their status and created problems. They tried to rule the earth. But now there is an unpredictable creature with a basis that no one can understand. This person was given powers from birth. His ability allows him to consume chemicals and to manifest his potential. Brian is the owner of a unique base, and now he has catastrophic power and is capable of incredible deeds. Using his extraordinary abilities, he fought against the Celestials. Very quickly, he became a real legend. It was obvious, because no one had ever seen anything like it before. Now it's time to go back a bit and tell his story from the beginning. He worked at a regular factory and was very tired, just like all his colleagues. Earning a living by physical strength is not an easy task, and after every day, my body is unbearably sore, as if after a real battle. Brian said goodbye to his friends and said he had to go. He wouldn't be able to join them for dinner because he would be busy. His friends could not understand what he was eating. Even after a full day's work, he was the only one who remained full of energy. Perhaps it's the vitamins that affect him. His partners often see him taking red ginseng before work. Now, 22 years old, Brian believes that vitamins are the best solution for situations where you lack strength and energy. His ability lies in the fact that medicines work better on him than on everyone else. He realized this when he started drinking nutritional supplements he received from a fellow soldier. 2 vitamin pills were enough to make his fatigue disappear completely after a day of hard work. Taking omega-3 pills made him clearer at once, and his concentration doubled. He benefited from this ability and constantly enjoyed the peculiarities of his body. One day, he was about to go to a cafe to eat something tasty, and at that moment, a beautiful girl approached him. Brian immediately began to think that this girl would start asking for his phone number, just like in the movies. However, this girl said that Brian was good-looking, and if he had a free minute, she would like to talk to him. Usually, in his country, people who are involved in cults or frauds say that, so he got upset and left. The girl's name was Sharon, and she asked him to believe her words, but Brian immediately began to run away. He believed that he would never meet sectarians in real life, but as it turned out, he was wrong. He dislikes everything related to celestials and sex because of his father. In general, his father was a very hard-working and stable man. He always dreamed of creating a medicine that would help him become a celestial. He told his wife about it, and after that, he quit his job and went to his parents' house in the village. There, he mixed medicines with different ingredients and personally priced them, which led to many hospitalizations with stomach pains. But one day, he left home in an unknown direction because he could not achieve what he wanted. He left his family only a letter saying that he would return when he regained his energy. But 20 years have passed since then. Brian was just a child at the time, and his mother was having a hard time after his father suddenly disappeared. His father could have just taken vitamins and supplements, just like Brian, instead of trying to create a magic cure. As soon as he left the store, something strange in the sky caught his eye. He looked up and couldn't figure out what it was. It looked like an unidentified flying object. When he went into the store, this was not the case. It is unlikely that this was done with the help of equipment for filming a movie. It feels like it's really a space plane, and it's doing something strange. At first, everyone started to think that an earthquake had started, but a little later it became noticeable that a huge hole had formed in the ground. In a few seconds, a huge red monster began to crawl out of the hole and onto the ground. It's not exactly what you want to see in the morning after you've bought yourself a delicious coffee in the store. This monster did not look friendly. It was not obvious that it wanted to befriend Brian and become friends with him. The guy quickly realized that he had to run away too, just like the other people did a second ago. But suddenly he felt that the nutrients from his energy drink had been successfully absorbed by his body. The fact is that this drink contains many active ingredients, such as caffeine and sugar. It quickly provided the boy's body with important energy and began to stimulate the nervous system. His senses and reflexes were sharpened to incredible levels, and everything around him began to seem very slow. It seems as if he is watching this situation in slow motion, and it is really strange. He had never noticed that he had such interesting abilities before, but he hadn't needed them that much before. Brian realized that with such abilities, he could easily defeat these demons, and he began to hate them from the very beginning. He felt that in this state, he could fight them on equal terms and not give in to anything. Incredible confidence immediately inspired the guy, so he started acting without hesitation. Of course, from the very beginning, he had not yet fully mastered all the abilities of his body. He needs a little time to learn all his strengths and understand his weaknesses. But even this is enough to defeat simple monsters in an even battle, and this can already be considered an important achievement. While everyone else was running away and trying to find a safe place, Brian was able to challenge the monsters and not be afraid of their power. Of course, this was a problem, because the other monsters immediately saw a strong competitor and united to destroy him. The guy quickly realized that he had no choice but to fight bravely and show who the real lion was. He started hitting them from different sides and made them respect themselves and their strength very quickly. Although his actions attracted unnecessary attention from other monsters, he had enough strength to defeat them all. For him, they were all too predictable and slow, and it was easy for him to dodge their attacks and strike back. It took 10 minutes to destroy more than 10 opponents from the other side. Brian began to think that his troubles were over, but later realized how wrong he was. In a few moments, he saw another monster in front of him, but this red guy was much bigger than the others. He had no choice but to continue fighting. Perhaps the monster would turn out to be much weaker than it seemed at first glance. But it may also turn out that this red goblin is 10 times stronger than its smaller siblings. The worst thing about this situation is that Brian felt that the effect of the Energizer had worn off, so now he has real problems. People around them were trying to get used to the situation in their city. Some people began to hide in the store and hoped that the monsters would not be able to enter. All of them were incredibly scared, and no one knew what to do. They can be understood, they are ordinary people, and they hope for the help of professional military in emergency situations. Soon the store's doors were smashed, and now the monsters could enter the store. In normal situations, when you are threatened with death, your instincts start working at maximum as well as your intellect. When a person sees a huge red demon in front of him, as if from a Hellboy movie, his perception of the world changes. But our protagonist has already realized his strengths, so he decided to light a cigarette immediately. His internal body systems immediately recognized that he had taken an additional nicotine stimulant. His body immediately began to feel a surge of extraordinary energy. All his incredible abilities returned. As soon as he felt the strength in his body again, he immediately showed this monster what he could do. Brian began to feel incredibly confident in his own abilities, and he didn't want to stop there. He continued to smoke a cigarette and get nicotine into his body, which fills his body with energy through hyperstimulation of the nervous system. Its internal mechanisms begin to work better with the help of adrenaline. With the help of this, he is able to display incredible abilities and show extraordinary endurance. The boy quickly began to enjoy his strengths and continued to beat the big monster. He felt like the main character in some famous computer game. He had always dreamed of something like this. But in real life, just like in a computer game, monsters can respond with their own attacks. This situation was no exception to the rule, so the huge red demon tried to take revenge. He started screaming loudly and struck a powerful blow with his right hand, which, strangely enough, was accurate. Finally, Brian realized that he had not become a god and could also feel pain. He realized that his opponent was also strong. The battle began on opposite courses, and in such situations, the one who hits accurately and quickly always wins. By stimulating his body, Brian had a great advantage over his opponent. He very quickly took advantage of his strengths and began to literally drive the monster's head into the concrete. It was incredibly brutal, but now the world has turned into a real jungle. Either you win or you are defeated. Through this situation, Brian realized that cigarettes can also help him in difficult situations. After that, he started thinking about his mother, and he hopes that nothing bad has happened to her during all this time. He completely forgot that the red demon could still be alive, and he paid for it very quickly. This monster managed to regain its strength, get up, and get ready for the second round. Now they have completely changed places, and Brian felt what it is like to have your head crushed like a watermelon. But nevertheless, there is still a big difference between them. Brian has extraordinary abilities, unlike the monster. This is not enough to stop the red demon's attacks and protect your life. They were much more powerful and helped him avoid big problems. The blow to the lungs was enough to make the monster lose consciousness for a while. This battle has taken too much of Brian's energy. He is so tired that he can't even move his fingers. Later, he opened his eyes and heard that people around him were trying to escape from the attacks of these monsters. Of course, not everyone is as lucky as he is. Only he has such extraordinary abilities. Other people are not so lucky. He looked at these monsters and couldn't understand where they came from in their world and why they attack defenseless people. This made him very angry. He has always been uncomfortable with injustice. A little later, he saw one of the monsters attacking a defenseless and fat man who could not defend himself on his own. It seems as if this situation was the last straw, and Brian completely lost his mind because of anger. This fat man was already close to becoming a nutritious breakfast for the red monster. Suddenly, everyone around them began to look up and saw an angel descend from heaven. No one could understand what kind of creature it was. Only a little later, it became clear that it was a person. This man in a white coat pulled a card out of his pocket and threw it in the direction of the monsters. After that, an electric field was triggered, and it was noticeable how the red monsters suffered because of this attack. At that moment, the people were unharmed, and they quickly realized that this person had come to help them. At that moment, Brian was very close by and personally observed these strange events. He looked at this person and could not understand who he was and why he had come here. In any case, it looked incredible, as if it were some kind of superhero. A little while later, Brian realized that he was looking at a very beautiful girl with snow-white hair. She approached the boy and looked at him in surprise, as if she was trying to analyze him with her eyes. She saw that he was able to defeat a huge bunch of monsters without any training, and now she wants to understand who he is. A little later, she said that she wanted to see his abilities and potential, so he had to give her his hand. From the very beginning, Brian did not understand anything. He behaved like a mentally retarded boy. That is why this girl was forced to use her strength and use it to get Brian's hand. She looked closely at this group to understand what the basis was inside the guy. She quickly realized that it had no heavenly, earthly, or even human basis. With the help of her experience, she realized that he was facing a real catastrophic basis that was difficult to explain. At first, she thought that such a fool could not be the bearer of such an important foundation. But if this really happened, she cannot let him live, because with such powers, he is capable of creating a catastrophe. She realized that she had to destroy this guy immediately, and it was at that moment that he started talking to her. He began to thank this girl for saving him and said that he did not even know how to thank her. This made her immediately stop and start doubting her future actions. She began to make strange movements with her hands and created some kind of incomprehensible blue core. She said she was very sorry that he was wasting his talent and pure energy. That's why she gave him the blue kernel, and at first he felt a bitter taste in his mouth, but then his body began to change. The girl explained that this core was created to seal the center of his energy. From the very beginning, it was used to seal up demons of incredible cruelty that could not be controlled. But now this core is the only way to save this young man's life. In the future, his uncontrollable abilities may destroy him and turn the world into chaos. His body may be very heavy now, but soon he will realize that it was for the best. She always asked him not to hate her for this act, and if he was lucky, they would meet again. Brian tried to stop her and ask her a few more questions, but she quickly disappeared from his sight. He still couldn't understand why she gave him this medicine, and what incomprehensible basis did she even discuss. Only a little later did he begin to realize that this might be due to his extraordinary abilities. If not for his new talents, he would have been lying on the ground with a broken skull long ago. A little later, the guy found the strength to get up and went to the nearest store. He found the right drink and immediately started drinking it to improve his health. The stimulant was taken in order to use his abilities and survive in this difficult world. His liver and kidney functions began to work better, and his detoxification intensified. Soon he got home and took a lot of hangover drinks with him, although he was not sure they would help. The guy began to recall a conversation with this girl. She was talking about some kind of catastrophe. The nucleus she gave him was supposed to affect his body and his abilities. Brian decided to deal with all this later and go in search of his mother. It was at this moment that he received a message on his phone, and he thought that monsters might appear in other cities as well. The message said that people should stay in safe places and not go out. They also offered to download an application to their phones to fill in the necessary information and follow the instructions. I quickly realized that this app looks like it was developed in a hurry. In order to pass the verification process, you need to scan his ID card. Soon after, the process was successfully completed, and the system notified him that he would be redirected to the main page of the application. Suddenly, Brian saw a lot of red hieroglyphics around him, and he thought it was because of the medicine the girl in the white coat gave him. The system reported that a divine basis had been found and confirmed in his body, and the analysis of his abilities had begun. He could not understand anything, but he began to guess that it might be connected with that girl. If he now sees that his basis has no explanation, then this is exactly what she was talking about. Soon, strange things started happening to his body, and he began to feel weak and sick to his stomach. He was upset that this was happening now. Perhaps it was due to the kernel that the girl gave him. He immediately took out the rest of the hangover ammunition and began to drink it greedily. Soon he felt a little better, so these drinks really work. The analysis of his body's abilities was still ongoing, and the system informed him that the type of his divine basis would soon become clear. Pravda began to get visibly excited. Even though he understands little about it, he feels that it is something important. The blue core, the color of this substance is blue, it symbolizes wood, and in rare cases it is based on water. All this is called the blue core of empty energy, and among the various types of ingredients that surround our world, it is considered one of the best. Finally, the guy's body felt the stimulant. The active substance at the moment is the blue nucleus of empty energy. The empty blue energy was part of the nucleus that the celestial being had given to Brian earlier. The hangover ammunition helped neutralize the poisonous ingredients of the core, and only empty blue energy remained in his body. After that, strange things began to happen to our protagonist's body, and he immediately realized that his body temperature had risen significantly. He realized that he needed to wait a bit for his body to adapt to these changes. He found a comfortable pose for waiting, which is exactly the kind of pose in movies where meditation takes place. All this time, he believed that his foundation had no explanation, but the system began to say something about an earthly foundation. She told me that his type of divine base is earthly. He has a strongly developed wood energy, so he needs to develop this ability properly. Of course, all this looks very strange because this celestial woman gave him medicine because she saw in him a basis without explanation. Now he doesn't understand anything, but he only feels that the poison inside him has been neutralized. Perhaps some components of her medicine remained in his body and changed something in his abilities. In any case, this is good, because if he really had a face without an explanation, he probably had to flee. Soon after, the president started appearing on breaking news, which was long overdue. He greeted all the members of the state and said that his future words were absolutely true. 10,000 years ago, the world was a much more impressive place than our world today. Creatures that we now call monsters walk the earth, while beings from other worlds change galaxies to come to our world. In those incredible times, people were brutally exploited and had no rights. It was very difficult for them. In the midst of all this chaos, some chosen ones received a divine foundation, an incredible power they did not even suspect. People's life expectancy has increased, and so has their endurance. Our world has become one where anyone could get this power, and later such people were called celestials. These people gave their own lives to close the gates and allow only humanity to flourish on this earth. The achievements of the Celestials were passed down from generation to generation in legends and myths while they continued to defend the gates. They have continued to do so in parallel with the development of human civilization, or at least continued to do so until recently. The non-gods will be patrolling their assigned areas of the city, which is how the state will try to ensure the safety of citizens. All Celestials are very qualified and have the right to apply the law if necessary. Brian looked at the system analysis and tried to understand what it means to match skills to abilities. A little later, a lot of different information appeared in front of him, and he realized that all of this was his skill set. There are 3 main centers in his body: upper, middle, and lower, and it is in these places that he feels the heat. After systematic training for some time, he will feel heat in at least one of these 3 zones. As soon as this heat spreads to all 3 zones, Brian can start training the earthly directions. Earth directions is a breathing technique that helps lay the foundation for a workout. Yesterday, this guy hated everything to do with Celestials, and now he sits and practices the technique of mystical breathing. From the very beginning, Brian realized that it was much easier than he had previously thought. Even though there is a divine basis, it still takes a long time to feel the heat in 3 zones at the same time. For some people, this process takes months and even years, depending on their abilities. But with intense training, you can reach a state where you lose track of time. Brian very quickly took his first step in becoming a Celestial and immediately felt progress. He was really so immersed in this breathing technique that he completely forgot about the sense of time. It is unclear how many hours or days he spent in meditation, and now his phone is completely dead. He decided to go out into the corridor to look at the date and see how many hours the meditation process had lasted. Of course, Brian was shocked when he realized that he had spent more than 100 days in breathing practices. Soon he calmed down and returned home, lucky to have hot water and to be able to take a bath in peace. He felt that all his wounds had healed and he was not hungry at all, even though he had not eaten for 100 days. It seems as if he hasn't even lost weight during this time. On the contrary, his muscles have become more voluminous and stronger. During this time, his phone managed to charge and he decided to check the latest news. When he last looked out of the window, he saw a huge dome-like barrier outside. Since a huge funnel appeared in this place, from which monsters came out, they probably decided to isolate this area. They completely forgot about Brian because he was engaged in meditation and forgot to evacuate him. As soon as he opened his window, he saw that he was surrounded by huge, scary monsters. It will be hard for him to get used to this reality, and now he must find a way out of this place as soon as possible. He spent more than 100 days in lotus position to reduce the fever in his body, which is probably a unique and amazing technique. The system reported that it was not connected to the network, which is necessary for the system to function properly. He started looking at information about himself and learned something. He has a high level of achievement in interesting techniques. His first technique is the 9th ranked fast movement technique, which sounds quite interesting. He clicked on the card but didn't feel anything special, as if nothing had changed. I had to take a few steps to realize that everything was working well. You could say that it's like the magic of compressed space, but that's not all. It has other abilities. There's a technique that increases his muscle strength and light punch skill, but monsters can see the light and come to him. Later, he found a section on training techniques, and it was there that he first saw the breathing technique he spent 100 days on. Training techniques help to improve the current level of the Celestial and add new skills and strength. Of course, this requires many years of training because raising the level is an expensive pleasure. In reality, he quickly calculated that he would turn 70 and only then would he be able to use additional skills. It seems as if he will practice the breathing technique all his life until he dies. To measure your achievements, you need to concentrate energy in both hands and extend your left arm. The number of rings that appeared on the left hand is an indicator of the level of the Celestial. Brian was trying to understand his current level and decide what to do next. But at that moment, someone interrupted him. At first, he felt someone walking down the hall, and soon he saw a large monster in front of him. He immediately returned to his room to remain unnoticed because he did not want to meet this huge bulldog at all. Brian was visibly nervous and tried to find a way out of this difficult situation. He needs to find some equipment that will help in the battle against this monster. The boy has less and less time because he has already felt the door of the room open and realized that the monster has finally found him. He did not even have a minute to prepare for the battle because this huge dog immediately started attacking. It moved lightning fast toward Brian and bit him on the left shoulder, its teeth designed to tear his opponent to shreds. In ancient China, there was a technique called the absorption method, which was considered the most ruthless of all. The fact is that it allowed taking the lives of animals, which is why it was considered so cruel. At this critical moment, Brian chose an ability that is very similar to this technique, the art of planting seeds. An incredible strength immediately appeared in his hands, with the help of which he was able to throw this terrible beast away from him. All this was so powerful that this huge dog could not even get up for a while, as if he had already died. An incredible aura was created around the guy, and that's what meditation for 100 days can do. If not for this ability he had just used, Brian would have been dead long ago. A little later, the system informed him that the stimulant had been absorbed by his body. The active ingredient is protein and iron, and as a result, Brian will gain muscle mass. But even that is not all. His blood sugar level will decrease, his body will be filled with energy, and red blood cell production will increase. At first, he could not understand anything. He just began to feel that there was too much energy in his body. It seems to have something to do with the nutrients that got into his body when he destroyed the monster. This is great news because this energy should be enough to last after the light strike. Most of all, the guy was surprised by a rather interesting episode. He approached the monster and saw that plants were starting to grow on it. He remembers for sure that they were not there from the very beginning, so all this was created after the battle with the monster. He decided to take them with him in case they would be useful to him in the future. Brian can use his seed planting technique on an opponent only once. If he has time to absorb the energy of monsters before he kills them, it is better to avoid meeting several monsters at the same time. We have to wait for the rescue team to arrive. Now is the perfect time to take advantage of the flash of light. This technique will not kill the monsters, but it may be enough to make them run away and call for help. In this case, he should take advantage of it, especially considering the fact that he has now met another huge monster. These vile monsters are not going to prepare for an attack for a long time. As soon as they see their target, they attack immediately. This time, Brian's left hand was unlucky. It was in front, and the monster immediately began to bite it. The guy was not confused and remained quite calm. He activated the layering technique. All of this was done to make this vile creature let go of his hand and get away from him. A few powerful blows to the jaw should help this monster realize who's in charge. Now is not the time to do stupid things. Brian must find a way out of this area of the city as soon as possible. You have to quickly climb up to the ceiling of the house and signal for help with a light strike. This can be a problem because the number of angry monsters around is too high. But Brian has to find the strength to do this, because otherwise he will be forced to fight for these animals in this house forever. Now it has enough strength to defend itself against their attacks and strike back. But there is a huge problem in the number of these monsters around. There are too many of them, and they are all ready to fight. A light strike will help you call for help, but on the other hand, it will attract additional attention from monsters. Once Brian reached his destination, he realized that all those monsters in the house were not very scary. A truly scary and eerie sight awaited him ahead, something truly frightening. Brian began to panic because he realized that there was nowhere to run, and more monsters were waiting for him behind. There is only one way out: to go forward and not pay attention to anything, to forget about fear and fight as if the future of humanity depended on it. The guy waited for the perfect moment to use the light strike technique. This blow was really impressive and made the monsters lose their ability to see for a while. This light could be seen even in other cities, so it should be enough to call for help. For a while, the monsters disappeared and gave the boy a chance to rest a bit. Soon after, a strange sound started to come from the house, and Brian thought it was the rescuers. When he looked up, he realized that it was not exactly a rescue team, but a man flying in the air. He immediately greeted the boy and said that he was called the Fire Taoist. He couldn't understand why Brian was standing still. Didn't he have an ability card for flying or jumping? Brian explained that he only has 3 cards that he received from the beginning. The man continued to talk to the boy, but Brian tried to warn him of the impending danger. It seems that the Fiery Taoist does not pay attention to these small monsters at all, as if he is not afraid of them at all. As soon as he saw one of these monsters approaching him, he immediately cast a spell. It was very interesting to watch. It was immediately clear that this celestial is much more experienced than Brian. He handled this monster in a few seconds and didn't even make any extra effort. Then he turned to Brian and said that he would not repeat himself 3 times, and again ordered him to put his hand forward. The guy was shocked and frozen in place, as if the man's strength had hypnotized him. Realizing that the boy was scared, the Fire Taoist used his technique to do everything he needed to do on his own. It's time to find out more about Brian. Why he is wandering around in this forbidden zone without support? Does he really want to die? Brian was constantly smiling and never stopped thanking the man for saving him. Soon they left the restricted area, and Brian noticed that he had received messages from all his relatives on his phone. This is not surprising because he stayed in the area for more than 100 days, and it is good that his family was not injured, although a lot could have changed during this time. Now he is very curious about how much the rest of the world has changed and is looking forward to learning about it. Soon he called his mom and made sure she was okay, and he also said that he was safe now. He was informed that an investigation into the incident of his rescue was needed, which should not take long. He promised his mother that as soon as he was free, he would call her again. After this conversation, one of the law enforcement officers brought him tea, and Brian was in a great mood. He was happy that he was safe now, and especially happy that his relatives were okay. At that moment, an aggressive man with blonde hair entered the room, looking for Brian. The guy was told that he would now talk to the commander with Edward, one of the students of the manager of this unit. Edward was very aggressive. He immediately ordered the assistant to leave immediately, without taking into account the fact that he had not finished speaking to Brian. It was clear that if the assistant did not obey Edward, a real fight would break out in that room. After that, they finally started talking, and Edward wanted to know if Brian had studied divine techniques before the heavenly gates opened. When he learned that this was not the case, Edward began to realize that he was facing a worthy man who could wake up his sleeping teacher. When Brian heard these words, he looked quite shocked, thinking that he had been confused with someone else. Edward opened the system in front of him and told him that it says there are 9 levels of celestials. Those who have only just awakened are called students, but their teacher has already recognized their abilities and given them an ascending level. That is why Edward considers himself very talented and strong and believes in his extraordinary potential. He believes that the age of the student does not matter at all, only how you learn and who your teacher is. Brian became interested in talking about this. And if the rising level is just the beginning, what level is Edward's teacher? This question made Edward very angry. He started shouting at the guy and called him a mentally retarded rat. He explained that if one has a divine basis from birth, then he is obliged to obey his senior predecessors. If Brian says something like that about his teacher again, Edward promises him a tough test. Brian noticed that Edward speaks the same way as his teacher, the Fire Taoist, and he probably does it to be like his teacher. These words made this angry guy even angrier, as if he was going to explode right now. Before that, Edward had already told us that after the upward level comes a high level. And it was at this moment that Brian showed his body analytics and demonstrated that he was at a high level. This means that he is stronger than Edward, meaning that Edward must obey him in everything. This is exactly what Edward was telling him a few minutes ago. So now is the perfect time to remind him of these words. Soon Edward returned to his teacher and told him about the whole situation. It turned out that now Edward began to listen to this guy in everything, and even gave him his own room. Of course, it is not difficult to guess how furious the fiery Taoist was about this news. He doesn't understand how Edward, who has gangster fighting techniques in his arsenal, could behave like that with this puppy. The student immediately began to apologize and beg for mercy, explaining that the level of the Brahmin was higher than his level. Probably it's all about the constitution of this guy's body, and if that's the case, it means that he has a basis that has no explanation. Edward tried to explain all this to his teacher, but he did not listen to him at all and called it all nonsense. He explained that Brian has an earthly foundation. That is, he was born with the same foundation as the Fire Taoist in Edward. Probably all this is explained only by the fact that this guy has a lot of wood in his nature, and perhaps because of this, his training speed will be higher. It is quite rare to see people with a wood element, and this has a logical explanation. People came out of the water to step onto the land, and then they lit a fire to get rid of the cold. People used to float metal to extract it in its pure form from ore, although all living beings have a common feature, but there is no harmony in their relationships. Probably, Brian's message about the request for help came to the master because his case is too rare. If Edward understood everything, he should try not to say anything about the methods of construction. The teacher promised to give him medicine after his breathing stabilized. The Fire Taoist finds some of Brian's abilities surprising because he had never heard of the solar wind ability before. Perhaps only those who have the nature of the tree in their divine base have this ability. According to the country's leadership, there is no human being with a divine basis without an explanation. It was clearly stated that all the results of the test of the non-explanatory divine basis were isolated. Probably at that very moment, no one discovered the existence of Brian, and therefore no one knows about him. The divine basis is divided into 3 types: heavenly, earthly, and human divine basis. But then a 4th type emerged, the strength of which is simply impossible to measure: the non-explanatory basis. In recent decades, when celestials have all but disappeared, the holders of a non-explanatory basis have tried to intervene in this world. It was then that the celestials united with each other to expel them from this world. Only legends and myths have been left as reminders of this, and some even believe that these are just children's stories. In these legends, a lot was said about the warriors called Stephen and Kenneth, who are considered heroes. Brian thinks it's strange that if you're different, you have to be kicked out of the community, even though people like Stephen and Kenneth are respected. After drinking a cup of the delicious liquid, his body immediately took in the new stimulant, the active ingredients being catechin, theanine, and caffeine. It turned out that this cup contained brown, rice-based tea, which turned out to be very tasty and nutritious. Now, the guy believes that the system showed him his earthly divine basis because he took the empty blue substance. Before the effect of this substance ends and everyone else finds out about it, we need to find something with a similar effect. But it is very difficult to do. The state probably restricted such information for ordinary people. Brian began actively searching the internet for information about the drug and found an interesting article from an anonymous source. He told me about some interesting seeds he had learned about in his grandfather's book. These seeds contain 3 important sources of energy: nicotine, caffeine, and alcohol. Brian immediately recalled the past events and thought that it might be the same seed he had found on the body of the slain monster. He immediately took it out of his pocket and began to examine the seeds, which were probably more widespread than he had previously thought. And now he started looking for more information on the internet, because he had never seen exactly where these seeds grow. With the help of an article from an anonymous source, he learned a lot, and it said that his grandfather's book had more information about these seeds. The author is ready to talk about all this for free. He calls it the herb of purgatory. This plant can be called wild. It grows next to the Sanzu River, and if you eat it raw, you can get seriously ill. But the seed that has already grown is an elixir that gives dark energy and can help a lot. Having learned so much important information in a short period of time, he wondered if it was difficult to grow these seeds. He immediately remembered that the seeds he had started to germinate very quickly. He decided that he needed to start experimenting with the seeds that showed no signs of growth. To do this, he will try to act according to the solar wind breathing technique, which he has used before. Within seconds, he was surprised to see the real effect of this extraordinary technique. The seed he held in his hands began to germinate with incredible speed. At that moment, Edward burst into his room as if he wanted to talk about something important. A little while later, Edward realized that there was no one in the room, as if Brian had run away somewhere. He started looking for this guy everywhere, because he knew he couldn't have gotten far. He also began to suspect that Brian might have stolen something from him, and later he saw that one peach was missing from the refrigerator. It turned out that Brian was already a few hundred meters away from the apartment, on the street. He needed the seeds for an important cause, not just because he was very hungry. Now it's time to continue learning and make even more progress and finally find out the answers to some questions. With the help of his solar technology, the guy saw that a full-fledged tree quickly grew from a seed. 2 breathing times were enough for the seeds to grow so quickly, which is an incredible indicator. So, through breathing, you exchange energy with everything around you. The ability of the solar wind helps plants grow faster. And if you continue to grow medicinal herbs like this, everything will be fine. Brian will be able to continue to live without problems with his divine foundation, but first he has to eat it and see the effect. The stimulant was successfully taken into his body, the active ingredient being purgatory grass. The guy felt familiar sensations, just like the last time, and heat began to spread through his body. He hoped that the acquisition would continue in this way, but suddenly he felt that nothing was working. He decided to try again, but the result was the same. He couldn't understand why something was going wrong. He seems to feel some effect from this technique, but he feels it only in the area of his stomach. Surely an empty blue nucleus as a medicine is much better in quality, but how can he get it again? He didn't stop and kept trying again and again. Perseverance is one of this guy's strengths. Soon he finally felt the heat of his body begin to change, and the result was not long in coming. The guy began to mention information that was written on the internet, especially about dark energy. This plant has a dark nature, and the blue substance is the nature of wood. The solar wind breathing method has the method of absorbing the energy of wood. Perhaps he should learn this method of breathing to absorb the dark nature. But on the other hand, if it turns out that the energy is mixed, then his life may be in danger again. In any case, he is satisfied with the result. His efficiency is certainly decreasing, but his strength is increasing. In the end, he almost forgot to tear out the tree that had grown in this short time. Soon, the weather changed very quickly, and he received an urgent alert on his phone. People are warned of a second-level natural disaster due to the death of the 65th son of the Western Sea Poseidon. Everyone who lives near the Western Sea should evacuate immediately. But why did Brian find out about this only now? The danger of the second level is no joke, and if you don't find a safe place in time, you can forget about a quiet life. On the street, people immediately noticed huge worms, but this is hardly dangerous because these creatures live only where there is access to the ground. Other people asked each other not to touch these disgusting slugs and to hope for the best. Soon Brian noticed that there was something like a small protective dome above them, as if it was attached to the building. Now he realizes that he was lucky that he saw other people coming here and managed to go with them. But soon everyone noticed a big and scary monster appearing, probably to eat these disgusting worms. Some people have not yet managed to find a safe place and a hiding place, so they are in a threatening situation. Brian looked at this monster and realized that they could be in trouble. The problem is that there was a young woman with a dog near this monster. She was crying and begging someone to help her. Soon it became clear that the monster had seen and heard her and decided to grab the woman in its claws. It turned out that this monster carries around a large vase where he collects worms for his dinner. He threw the woman into this vase and she found herself in a not very pleasant company. It is unlikely that this great demon will stop. Perhaps he has children who also need to be fed this evening. People in the safe house were quite calm. They were happy that they had managed to find protection, because otherwise they could have ended up in this woman's place. At that moment, these people began to smell cigarettes, and it turned out that this smell was coming from Brian. He looked at what was happening outside and realized that this should not happen. Even if these events are caused by an upset Poseidon, we cannot leave ordinary people unprotected. That's why he stubbed out his cigarette and ran out into the street, and the people around him were shocked by his stupid behavior. It's already clear how much Brian hates monsters, and it became apparent from the first battle against the Red Goblin. He did not even allow this monster to prepare for the battle and immediately struck the first blow. It looked really powerful, and it was enough for the monster to drop the vase with the woman on the ground. Even Brian was shocked by the strength of his punch. He knew he wasn't that strong a week ago. This is probably due to the herb of purgatory, which gives its owner incredible strength. Brian began to realize that it wasn't rain that was falling on him, but the tears of a grieving Peyton who had lost his son. His body immediately absorbed the stimulant from the tears of the Pseudomonas, which can also be used to its advantage. Water always nourishes trees and thereby makes them grow faster, which makes these plants stronger. By activating and amplifying the energy of the wood element, Brian becomes capable of crazy things and is ready to use his strengths. From this tree, he was able to make a sword that expels demons from this world. Let's see if it is so strong in real life. Meanwhile, the demon managed to get up after the last missed shot and became incredibly angry. He prepared for a brutal revenge and promised to destroy this guy. Few people in this world can challenge this monster. Only a few have extraordinary abilities. Everyone else has to run and hide. Brian took this sword in his hands and prepared for a fierce battle. He is not going to retreat and is ready to fight to the very end. The monster is in the same mood. Both of them are incredibly motivated and ready to give their lives for the sake of victory. They both need to understand that in such battles, only one person remains. There is no room for error. If Brian weakens his position even a little bit now, the monster will easily destroy him in a few seconds. This cannot be allowed. There is only a little bit left to the protective barrier, and the guy must survive. He was able to find the weaknesses in the monster's defense very quickly and targeted these areas with his attacks. The first hit was enough to send the huge demon back to the ground. The most interesting thing is that even after an incredibly powerful attack, the weapon did not have a single scratch. It seems that this is the peculiarity of this sword. It is incredibly resistant to any attacks. During this time, the monster had already managed to get back to its feet and was preparing to continue the battle. The boy noticed that the demon could not take his eyes off the sword blade, perhaps because peach trees can drive away ghosts. The woman who fell into the vase of worms a few minutes ago realized that now was the perfect moment to escape. But the monster very quickly saw that she was trying to escape and approached her closely. Brian realized that if he didn't intervene now, this woman would be nothing but bones, and that could not be allowed. It was because of her that he left the safe house, so we need to do everything to save her again. When you have such an extraordinary sword, you immediately gain a slight advantage over your opponent. One well-aimed punch was enough to make the monster let go of the girl, and he just had to catch her in his hands in time, like a real hero. She immediately began to thank her savior, but Brian assured her that it was too early to relax. The battle is not yet over, and the monster is not yet defeated. The second round begins. This huge bird was very angry, holding the girl in his arms. Brian made the right decision. He started to run away. Now we will see if he has enough strength and speed to escape from the claws of this nasty demon. The girl realized that she could not help him in any way, and she could only pray that Brian's strength would be enough to save them both. At the last moment, he managed to use his power to throw her to safety under the protective dome. But because of this, Brian completely forgot about his personal defense and missed a very powerful and unpleasant blow. He hit his back and head badly, and now he is really in mortal danger. If the active substances in his body stop working at that moment, he will hardly be able to escape from this monster. Fortunately, he did not break any bones and can continue to fight, although the effect of the substance is almost over. He hopes that the woman has managed to get to a safe place and will be fine. But right now, he's better off not thinking about other people. He needs to focus on his own safety and figure out a way to retreat. A huge demon bird is furious that his dinner was taken away from him. He dreams of arranging a bloody vendetta against this guy. Brian looked into the eyes of this monster and thought that when it was that big, it was a fraud to attack from the air. He realizes that he won't have time to get to the evacuation site, as the effectiveness of the stimulants is weakening and he is losing his strength. He thought he could plant seeds, but they would be difficult to use against the flying monster. Whatever he chooses now will be a gamble with minimal chances of survival. That's why he decided to use his weapon, a sword that expels demons. It's not an ordinary sword. It has the properties of a plant. It needs a lot of time to exchange energy to become sufficiently developed and strong. Now that it is raining Poseidon tears, you can increase the strength of this sword with magic that absorbs this rain. You can also keep the energy in him after defeating the demon, confident that he will succeed. His level should be enough to use this technique and win this difficult battle. To do this, it needs to direct the energy of the solar winds, an ancient technique of lightning striking. If everything is done correctly, this monster will finally feel the true power of the divine basis, which has no explanation. Brian completely forgot about fear and jumped to meet his death, a very brave act for such a young man. It was a very fast and powerful blow at the same time. This monster will remember this battle for a long time if he survives. It looks like Brian wants to destroy him so badly that he's ready to fight non-stop and forget about rest. This is what true perseverance and self-confidence looks like. Every week his development and progress becomes even more obvious, and the guy feels it well. His last blow proved fatal for his opponent, and the monster was left without a head after this attack. Of course, many people gathered to see this incredible performance with their own eyes. They were shocked because it seemed as if they were in a movie theater watching a real Superman. This bird was a favorite of a powerful deity, so even when someone died from its attack, the state did not react to these events at all. And it was in this situation that someone appeared who did not care about the lives of other people. This man decided without any doubt to save a woman who was in danger. He didn't care that he was risking his own life, as if a new superhero had appeared in the world. During this battle, many people took out their phones and started filming it immediately. Thanks to these hidden filming, we could see what happened to Brian after the battle with the monster. He was insidiously attacked by a fire Taoist master who shouted at the boy and said that he had caused a lot of problems. He has just killed Lady Pinafore's favorite creature, and his ignorance of the situation absolves him of responsibility. The fire Taoist believes that even burning him alive would be too weak a punishment for such an act. After his attack, he ordered his assistant Edward to immediately grab the boy and take him with him. As mentioned earlier, fragments of this situation were filmed and posted on social media. Millions of people soon saw the video and began to actively discuss the situation. They already knew that this monster was constantly eating people and no one could stop it. Soon after, the legendary Lady Pinafore learned that her pet had been killed, and it's not hard to guess what her reaction was. She was incredibly angry and hoped that the guy who did it had already been severely punished. She was told that he was still alive, but immediately after the incident, he was taken into custody. Lady Pinaqua was incredibly angry that this fool was still breathing and calmly continuing. She ordered me to tell all the people that if they did not want to see her anger, they should immediately tear him to pieces. Her assistant explained that a recording of the battle was posted on the internet, and now it has become a hot topic of discussion. The new leadership hopes that the lady will understand. They are afraid that the community will be disturbed by the actions of the Celestials. Lady Pinaqua believes that this world is too boring because the state is afraid of its own citizens. and the assistant assured me that they had already figured out a way to satisfy her and that everything would be ready soon. Also at this point, it became noticeable that the rain was getting less and less, so we finally calmed down. It is only an illusion that higher beings are free from their desires. A Poseidon will not cry over the death of a boy who was not even his legitimate son. He is probably satisfied with the ritual of summoning rain. In any case, Lady Pinafore got what she wanted. This plant is called a treasure of fantasy even among deities. Its flowers bloom once every 1,000 years. It also takes at least 1,000 years to get the fruits of this plant, which grows only in the garden of the Queen Mother of the Western Paradise. It is the peach tree of immortality. The orchard disappeared after the Queen Mother of the Western Paradise sacrificed herself to close the gates of paradise. Lady Pinafore is sure that if she can grow this tree, she will become the new queen of the Western Paradise. Back in the city center, as it turns out, Brian is still alive and enjoying life. Of course, after this incident, we had a very serious conversation with him. His actions were rash and put the Celestials in a bad light. Those who were ordered not to do anything else that would attract unnecessary attention in front of other people. They also explained to him who makes all the decisions in this world, and if he repeats his behavior, he will pay dearly. Of course, he did not do this for the sake of applause, but still, his act can hardly be considered a sin. Brian was guided by ordinary logic and used extraordinary abilities to save lives. He just wanted to make the world a better place. Although his new sword was taken away from him, he still received his trophy for this victory. After he killed the monster, he saw a piece of wood in its wings. It was tied to a monster, but who did it and why was a mystery. A little later, the guy realized that this was an unusual piece of wood. This plant was alive and he could feel it perfectly. Using the power of the sun's winds, he was able to get a sprout from this tree. Now he is sure that this can be considered an important trophy for defeating the monster and that this plant can be grown. A year passed very quickly after these events, and public discontent emerged in the world because of the odors that appeared around them. Now the government was forced to start discussing various measures to clean up the water. And people think that there are no problems in the water. The problem with these odors is due to the monster, so it is better to deal with it first. People are dissatisfied and believe that the state is not fulfilling its duties at all, and this whole situation happened because of the snake-headed monster. A month ago, when there were problems with the celestial energy, a monster appeared in the city's central river. This huge and terrifying creature is called a millennial spotted snakehead. He went through the world of monsters to the river in the world of people and became incredibly powerful, so now he claims to be a god. This monster wants to call himself the Lord of the River and said that now no one will be able to use the water until his demands for the victim are fulfilled. The new hero of our story, George, had already learned about this news and was unhappy with the actions of this stupid snake. George is a disciple of one of the 8 sacred celestials on the island, the Celestial Wolf King, the guardian of Johnson. He was asked to refrain from commenting on anything that was not related to the topic of today's meeting. A woman in a suit came into the office and asked everyone to take their seats as quickly as possible. Her name was Ruth. She is the youngest disciple of one of the 8 priestly celestials on the island, the immortal Donald, guardian of Mount Pectu. This girl immediately had a conflict with George. He believes that this is not a problem that they can discuss and solve on their own. Moreover, he looks into her eyes and realizes that it is wrong to solve this problem, and she understands this. From the very beginning, all this was based on the will of the elders, so we have to act as if everything is fine. Rude started yelling at him and said that this was not the behavior that the master was supposed to teach him. More than 10,000 people are already suffering from infectious diseases, including intestinal disorders. And that is why they must find an immediate solution to this problem, as her master ordered her to do. And she will not allow anyone, even a disciple of the Heavenly Wolf King, to insult her own master. But George doesn't understand how she is going to kill the Lord of the City River. Only yesterday, 4 mystical celestials who were near this river to destroy this monster failed. There is no one in this room as strong as those great celestials who tried to stop this monster yesterday. So it's surprising that this girl wants them all to unite and work together to stop this sea slug. The reason why the River Lord is difficult to defeat is that he uses earthly and water techniques at the same time. There are only a few people who could master the 2 techniques, just like the River Lord. Therefore, it can only be defeated by a celestial who has a sufficiently remote territory to drive the monster away with his power. Or it should be done by something that has a higher rank than land and water combined, such as a tree. George isn't going to stop anyone from doing their job, but he also doesn't want to get involved. He said that instead of doing these stupid things, he would rather go for an extra workout. After these words, all the other people followed him, and this large office became empty in a few minutes. If someone could destroy this snake, it would be the fastest solution to this problem. Ruth is ready to devote all her energy and strength to finding an opportunity to do so. The next day, she received something that looked like a wooden sword we had seen before. The girl knows that a year ago, a man killed a lady pinafore bird with this sword. The peachwood sword he used was confiscated and kept by the worshippers. It was a rare wooden instrument. It can be used even by those who have a low rank of celestial, and because it was in the form of a sword, many in heaven were very angry. But after the energy that filled the sword gradually disappeared, everyone calmed down. Ruth knows that this man hasn't left the city in recent years. He worked in a regular restaurant nearby. Sometimes he appears in various establishments with his mother or friends. Sometimes he visits movie theaters in his free time. The girl found out that this guy's phone was always off and he didn't use the app. Because of this, he or she will not be able to use the talisman or evaluate his or her achievements. If you consider what he went through, his actions become understandable. After she thought about this guy, a few minutes later she saw him running toward her in the garden. She was ready to talk to him because she had been looking for a meeting for a long time. But at the last moment he turned in a different direction. Ruth cannot miss this opportunity, which is why she activated the surprise stalking technique, the spirit of the roe deer. But the problem was that even using this powerful technique, she still couldn't catch up with him. She runs at full speed and uses her talisman, but the distance between them does not decrease at all. She kept repeating that she couldn't let this opportunity go until she realized that she had completely lost it. It was at this point that he finally appeared and spoke to her, and it seems that Brian realizes that she is connected to the Celestials. He explained that he did not want to run away from her, but he was surprised that someone was interested in him. She was surprised to see that he was sweating, which means that he did not use a talisman and ran away from her only using ordinary physical strength. She immediately pulled out her phone and handed it to him, probably to get him to finally log in. He started to change the user in the system and said that after that, he hoped it would leave him alone. When she saw his profile, she was incredibly surprised because he has an earthly divine foundation and a high level of achievement. He has the solar wind technique as well as the light step ability and 2 ability cards. Later, the girl told him that she wanted to use his wooden element to kill the River Lord. He cannot believe that the Celestials really want some monsters to die. He used to think differently, especially after what happened when he destroyed the flying monster. Perhaps this is just his vision of the situation, but he perceives it as deliberate neglect. Ruth disagreed with his thoughts and said that there was a reason why their leaders were not taking any active steps. They want to see how the students will cope with this problem on their own and not wait for the help of the masters. It's strange to hear this, so thousands of people are suffering at the same time because the masters are waiting for their students to act. Brian said that he was ready to act only if all sanctions against him were lifted. He would receive compensation and take back his sword. The girl was shocked that he knew she had come here with a sword. Brian explained that with his breathing, he can interact with the trees around him, a function of the technique he is currently studying. Probably for this reason, he can run fast in the forest, as the earthly base of Celestials is influenced by the environment that suits their element. Also, to start with, Brian wants to know if he can finally get rid of his curfew. The girl said that this problem has already been solved for this task, although it is still temporary. She explained that this is an important task that attracts the attention of others, and there is no one here who will shout because Brian will help. To begin with, the curfew was imposed by the bosses to punish Brian for killing the Lady Pinafore bird. Now this incident is practically forgotten, and the problem will be easily solved if Ruth does her best to persuade the man to finally destroy the snake. Soon she managed to persuade him, and together they went to the bank of the city river. They were not alone. Professionals who were unsure of the success of this plan came here with them. There was an incredibly stinky smell around. It was hard to be there. Ruth assured him that everything would be fine and that she needed to kill the serpent that controlled these waters. At the same time, she was looking at Brian and trying to figure out what he was going to do. This guy remained calm, showed no signs of nervousness, and kept looking at this river. He thought it was a very dirty business, but he knew what to do from the very beginning. For this mission, he immediately prepared something extraordinary, but he did not expect to have to use it from the very beginning. He took a few steps forward and heard Ruth stop him, explaining that he shouldn't get that close. Later, she finally realized that he had done it to throw some plants into the water. It's strange that she didn't see it when she was in elementary school. He used to grow it in his classroom. Later, she finally realized that he was using water hyacinth, a plant ideal for water purification. Half the work was successfully done, and now they immediately saw a response from the water monster. At that moment, Brian immediately pulled out his sword and said that he had long dreamed of fishing. The serpent was very angry that someone was trying to clean up his pond. He considers himself the god of this area. He is not someone who will take orders and do what other people want. But Brian has a completely different opinion on this. He came here to successfully complete the mission and does not think about the monster's wishes. We shouldn't forget about the hatred this guy feels towards all these demons. He hates them with every part of his body, and it's been a long time since he's enjoyed killing these ugly creatures. As he attacked and prepared to show his true strength, it was clear that the monster was surprised and even frightened. It seems as if he considers the attack on himself in this river a personal insult, something personal to him. We can be sure that he will not give up without a hard fight and will be a worthy opponent until the very end. But from the very beginning, he felt that the attack of this guy with a wooden sword was much more dangerous than the attack of yesterday's Celestials. This water snake immediately started shouting and calling the guy all sorts of unpleasant names. He was too uncultured. The water almost fell on the bodies of the people watching the battle, and if it was still contaminated, they would have risked death. But something amazing happened. With the help of his plants, Brian was able to completely purify the water in this river. But at his current level, it will still be too difficult for him to defeat such a strong and powerful creature. Even though he deals with energy that is very difficult to see, the snake is sure that these tricks will not work anymore. Brian began to have serious problems and realized that he needed to use more plants. He took some sprouts out of his pocket and started throwing them into the water, and very quickly they began to sprout. This battle has already turned out to be much more interesting than anyone expected before it started. The monster was surprised when he felt the power of a tree that had been defeated by lightning was directed at him. He couldn't believe that this guy was trying to destroy his super strong body with some little toy. But Brian has put all his heart, knowledge, and skills into this toy, and the monster will now feel it on his own body. It's a lightning dart of a storm that he spent a lot of effort creating, so he can't easily let the monster go. Although this water snake decided to run away and come back later, Brian had completely different plans. He wants to show all his skills today because he hasn't done much for a year. He has already forgotten how victory over strong opponents tastes, and he wants to make a loud statement to the whole world again. The water snake tried its best to escape and find a safe place, but did not have time to do so. The people around him were shocked by the capabilities of this warrior. Even Ruth, who brought him here, did not expect such a performance. Very quickly, sunlight reigned over the river again, and the water became completely clear again. There was no longer an unpleasant smell, only the smell of fried fish, and one could smell who would have a delicious dinner tonight. Now it is possible to enjoy life here again after being poisoned. Brian defeated the River Lord and restored hope to the people. In conclusion, he still believes that he acted quite badly and attracted unnecessary attention. It seems to the boy that this time everything will not end well, because there are reasons why the Celestials have ignored the Lord of the River until now. This reason may be the trials and tribulations of growth, which is only possible for students of masters, not for ordinary people. Brian made a hole in the monster's body and waited for a long time for the right substance, and soon he finally found it. It is the inner core of creatures that live in water, a crystal of effort that appears in the hope of becoming a dragon. At that moment, he saw angry people shouting at him above his head. They immediately imprisoned him in some kind of heavenly chains and said they would not forgive him for such an act. One of the 8 sacred deities on the island, the celestial wolf king, spoke to him. He was unhappy with the guy's actions and said that he did not understand what he had just done. The heavenly wolf king is George's teacher, which is why Ruth immediately recalled the words of this unpleasant fellow. It's strange that they appeared at the moment when the River Lord was killed. Probably right now, they also wanted to attack him. Although it's strange, Ruth immediately came up and greeted the master. She couldn't understand how these elders had ended up here. The Wolf King immediately recognized that he was speaking to a disciple of the immortal Donald. He cannot believe that the student of such a brilliant master does not understand the seriousness of this situation. The guy she brought here has only been training for a year, and he doesn't even have a master. If she continues to do such things, it will bring shame on her master. At this point, strange things began to happen, because Brian listened to all these words and began to laugh out loud. It seems as if he has completely lost the feeling of fear, but the guy thinks he has nothing to fear. He has done nothing wrong. They doubt him only because he has an unclear basis. This is not the first time this has happened. This was already checked with the app. And of course, Brian noticed that they appeared immediately after the snake died. It seems that this is exactly what they were planning, and he sees their true intentions very clearly. They must have been watching this snake quite closely for a long period of time, because they only appeared when he killed it. They thought that if they killed the fish, ordinary people would immediately show them mercy. And after he destroyed their plan to promote their student, they ran here as fast as they could. It all looks very funny, and Brian can't help but smile, even though the heavenly wolf king is about to explode with anger. He believes that this guy is to blame for what is about to happen, although some of his assistants thought it was too much. Then something strange happened. After an extremely aggressive attack by the master, Brian was still alive. He smiled and said that he was expecting this stab in the stomach just like before, and drew his sword. The heavenly wolf king was shocked by the behavior of this impudent boy who doesn't even have a master. Brian probably doesn't understand what it means to pick up his sword and point it at such a serious warrior. Now it's time for this impudent guy to say his last word before he dies. But Brian is still smiling. He said that he is not going to die today and will never be killed by the Wolf King. The master has never seen such impudence even from mentally retarded students, and now we are going to see an incredible show. The legendary warrior must demonstrate his abilities in front of everyone else to prove his authority. He started to attack the boy, but Brian remained calm and not nervous at all. He held his sword firmly in his hands and looked forward with full confidence in his own abilities. This attack by an experienced master was truly amazing. Brian had never encountered such strength and power before. A little later, everyone saw that by some miracle this guy had survived, protected by another master. It's time to meet the high-level spiritual celestial of the three heavenly kingdoms, the Master of Marks. He came and said that he had received a request from Lady Pinaqua, and that's why he came here now. He hopes that he is behaving correctly, despite the fact that he is preventing the wolf from demonstrating his strength. The Wolf King replied that the lady probably also wanted to take this guy for herself in order to tear him into a million pieces. Mark said that the Master Wolf King was even more stupid than he thought, but they should not fight each other so as not to spoil their reputation. After these words, Master Mark took Brian with him and disappeared in an unknown direction. The Wolf King was furious. He did not understand why this cunning and treacherous lady called the Elder Mark to help her to save a small slug. Meanwhile, Elder Mark found himself with the young talent in a large and spacious house. Brian has never seen such a large garden in a building before. It's very beautiful. It was as if Brian knew that the master would come and help him, which is why he behaved so relaxed. The master decided to give him some advice, because it was clear that Brian considered himself an exception to the rule. He explained that too arrogant behavior towards serious rivals often leads to a fall and defeat. After a short pause, Brian smiled and thanked the master for this advice. Exactly 1 year has passed since the day he cut off the head of the big bird. He still clearly remembers how shocked he was at that moment after what happened. No matter how good his intentions were, no one realized it. That's why he was well prepared from the moment rumors about the water snake first started to emerge. He was preparing for all this so that he would not have to go through all these difficult tests again. Now he has finally met Lady Pinaqua, and he is no longer going to act with a hot head. He is a self-confident guy and will not allow anyone to talk to him as if he were stupid or a child. Lady Pinaqua has a special garden, or rather a room in which divine medicinal herbs are carefully selected and grown. The history of this garden is most likely just a rumor, but Brian came up with a great plan to find the right evidence. This plan is very simple. It should attract the attention of the lady, the owner of this garden. One of the lady's assistants approached the boy and showed him the small seeds. Pinaqua greeted Brian and asked him if he knew what it was. The guy replied that these were seeds of the herb of purgatory, a rather rare plant that was found in mortals who bought it on the black market. Lady Pinafore began to inquire thoroughly about the seller of these seeds, which would seriously punish him in the future. She looked at Brian carefully, smiled, and asked him if he knew who the seller was. The guy immediately fell to his knees and began to apologize for his actions, saying that he had no choice and almost no money left. The lady smiled and asked him to raise his head. She believed that he had already paid enough for his sins. Despite the fact that she forgave him, he still has to be punished. The price for killing her monster was not small, but she is ready to be kind to him again if he agrees to work in her garden. The lady explained that she has a garden with trees and herbs, and she understands that Brian knows how to grow herbs from purgatory. He also has enough skills to clean the water polluted by a water snake with ordinary aquatic plants. The guy was pleased that the lady appreciated his skills so much. She even already knew about his solar wind technique. This technique helps the plant bloom in a few days, but with purgatory grass, it's much harder He's already tried to work with this plant. In other words, Brian is saying that he lacks the skill to do this. She appreciated his self-confidence. It was hard to believe that this guy was ready to dictate his terms at the first meeting with her. The lady decided to send him back with a small amount of medicinal herbs and give him all the tools he needed. Now he will work with young people to achieve success faster, and he will also be subordinate to them, so they will give him their power for this. Brian smiled, bowed, and thanked the woman for her compassion and kindness. After he left, we had another interesting dialogue that is worthy of note. It's time to meet the wilted flower of the Asura, a girl named Carol. She was asked about this young master Brian, and she said that she found him rather suspicious. He's too obedient. He doesn't want to see the garden in person because of the lady's orders. Carol had also heard all these stories about this guy killing the lady's favorite monster bird. And of course, rumors that it was he who recently destroyed the water snake, the lord of the river, also spread throughout the city. Of course, he is not experienced enough, but the fact that he has achieved all this means that he is either a genius or a psycho. Carol can't understand why. If the lady knows that this guy can't be trusted, she accepted him anyway. That's probably why Manhwa asked Carol to keep a closer eye on this guy. She will allow him to manage only the 6th garden, even if he has bad intentions. He will not be able to steal anything. If it turns out to be too stupid, it can become an ideal fertilizer for plants. Carol and the Pinafore have agreed to work together because of a peach on the half island, but the lady is the kind of person Carol would never have liked in normal life. Carol hopes that this young and talented guy will prove to be much more useful than ordinary plant fertilizer. It turned out that Brian could feel the celestial Carol. He felt that her power was more than 300, and the power of Lady Pinaqua was more than 400. He has already managed to reach 10 solar wind stars in 1 year, so he can already feel other people's powers, although he is not sure about these 2 women. If you think of the Heavenly Wolf King, who is very similar to a psychopath, his strength is 600. It's strange because Master Mar, who appeared and protected Brian, is roughly on the same level as Lady Pinaqua. Now the guy took out his phone and saw that the system update had begun, and soon there would be a new assessment of his divine basis. Later it turned out that he was already at a mystical level of achievement. He has secretly studied all solar wind techniques over the past year, but it's all just theory. Now it's time for real practice and improvement of his theoretical skills, and he's been waiting for it for a long time. Today he has brought something for his tree. It is the very object he took from the body of the water snake. He buried it near the roots of the tree, and it should help the plant become stronger. He does it for a reason and hopes that the plant will thank him for this help. A little later, he began the process of meditating near this tree, and he could spend several days in a row in such training. A little while later, he finally opened his eyes and smelled the incredible smell of peaches. He has been practicing for a year since he learned how to strengthen his attacks with his breath. But only a week ago, the flowers on the tree bloomed and produced their fruits, although they are still quite small. They look juicy and quite ripe, but why can't he eat it right now? Suddenly, he heard a voice behind him, asking him to take his time. He turned his head and was incredibly surprised to see a brown bear standing behind him. Of course, Brian immediately asked him who he was and why he had come here. It turned out that the elder had named this brown bear. It is called a guanac. Brian had already heard of this creature. He is the god of a famous mountain, and many legends have been composed about him. 100 years ago, earthly officials believed that the energy of the mountain's fire would have a bad effect on the city. They decided to add water energy and use a statue of a mythical horned lion. They didn't stop there and dug up the southern pond and many other things, and because of this, they terribly damaged the energy of Mount Guanashan. Bear has been training here for more than a year and hoped to meet the boy much earlier. It's unclear why the guanac didn't approach Brian earlier. Perhaps it was the peaches. After the tree started growing and changing the ground, the bear could not get through the barrier. He correctly asked him to wait a little while he ate one peach, but the bear started yelling at him and told him to stop. He believes that the energy of the tree is in the middle of this fruit, and if you pick it now, the tree's protection will stop working. Poppies will have serious problems if people who like this tree take it away after the protection stops working. The brown bear speaks not only about itself. Sooner or later, people will start to learn about the existence of this tree. Right now, someone is waiting for Brian at the bottom of this hill, and it may not be a friend at all. He looked up and saw that there was too much dark energy around him. If they destroyed the barrier to this extent, they definitely don't want to catch the Bryans here. Maybe they came for the peaches of the holy tree. Even now, the bear feels that one of the famous Taoists is coming here with a fire technique. With this preparation, Brian could have awakened the true form of this tree. But the human body is unable to absorb the healing properties of the peaches of the holy tree. But the bear is a different creature, so the peach must be given to him. He is confident that after that, he will be able to regain his strength and protect Brian and the tree from the bad guys. The boy gently picked the peach, said he was sorry, and ate the fruit by himself, while the guanac almost died of anger. He doesn't understand who this guy is and why he is both so stupid and so strong. This is the same peach of the holy tree that made the Monkey King Dong a celestial being. Now I wonder what exactly will happen to the briar. The nutrients have already been absorbed. The active ingredient is the peach of the sacred peach tree. The bear was very interested in the effect. He was wondering if the boy felt any changes in his body. Brian said that he felt that this peach was very juicy and tasty. The brown bear did not even have the words to comment on this stupid answer. While the brown bear was incredibly angry, Brian felt a warmth start to spread through his body. No matter what technique he tries, the heat does not concentrate on one point, but continues to spread throughout his body, and he does not know what to do with it. By the way, the warmth he feels now is completely different from the last time. It is warmer and gentler. Technically, it takes 3,000 years for even the smallest peach to be born, so the effect of a peach that is only 1 year old will be too weak. Brian asked the brown bear for help, but he said he couldn't help because he was exhausted. Then Brian gave him something, and the brown bear looked at it more closely and realized that he was looking at the seeds of the grass of purgatory. He was shocked that this ordinary guy had such plants, especially since these seeds began to germinate. Gavanek hopes that he will be able to keep the seeds and that Brian will not take them away from him. The boy thought that this bear was too cute and took some more seeds out of his pocket to give it to him. He hadn't looked so happy since he was a child, and it was obvious that he was very pleased to receive this gift. Brian hopes that the bear will be able to replenish his strength with this divine seed. The bear started eating the plant and said that from now on he could sell mountains and caves. Brian froze in place for a few seconds as if he had heard me. All 3 seeds of the herb of purgatory will not be able to fully restore the bear's strength, but it does not matter now. Right now, they should be thinking about those bad guys who are hunting for the Bryans right now. With the help of his phone in the system, the guy hopes to check their current location. It has that feature. This is a map of the area, and they need to quickly figure out what to do with this guy who is approaching them. Brian is going to fight against him because otherwise they will take away his peach tree, but the bear thinks that the boy will lose this fight. At the moment, his training is not enough to stop a valuable enemy, but for some reason, Brian is too calm. It turned out that our old friend, a student of the famous master, a young man named George, was approaching him. Soon he saw that Brian had personally decided to come out and meet him in this forest. Brian immediately felt the energy of this guy and realized that he was a disciple of the Heavenly Wolf King. It seems that his master ordered his pupil to personally bring the Brian to him. And for this purpose, he even gave his student an interesting artifact that could help in this battle. Brian hardly understands what this is. It's called the nine-tailed fox. The bear said that it was a very formidable weapon because even a fox with 5 tails had been seen only once, 300 years ago. It's hard to believe that such a treasure was made from a 9-tailed fox. It's really very rare. Since this artifact is very valuable and the tail is still intact, the energy of the celestial ghost must be enormous. It seems that despite the fact that his master is the Heavenly Wolf King, he is going to make an explosion with this artifact. The problem is that this explosion will take place in a city with a huge population, and other people may be injured. But George is calm. He says that it doesn't matter what skill he uses, and it doesn't matter how loudly Brian shouts. Because of this protective barrier, people in the whole city will not see or hear what is happening here, because it is the flag of the Northern Dark Squad. Guanak was shocked when they said that the energy was quite unusual, and it turned out that they were referring to a treasure that has the powers of the 4 heavenly beasts. George couldn't understand what kind of creature was sitting in the tree, and why was it always talking. Brian replied that he did not know this bear, and that it was the first time he had ever seen it. Probably a rabbit fluff. For a long time now, he has been explaining various interesting facts sitting on the top branch of this tree. We can say that this bear works for Wikipedia and is constantly explaining important nuances. George was furious. Lately, he had been annoyed with Ruth, and now this stupid guy with his bear showed up. He is unhappy that they all interfere in his affairs and believes that the water snake was his personal prey. So now, instead of the life of the water snake, which has already been killed, George is going to kill Brian. It was immediately noticeable that George's strength had increased by about 100 in a few seconds, which is 5 times his normal strength. It can be compared to an artifact in a game that you have to donate for. When Ruth came to Brian in the past, he distributed all his energy over the mountain and lowered his skills. It has now activated the wind distribution technique in the first power star, meaning it is returning the energy it previously distributed. We are going to see a battle between two very talented young masters. George is more experienced, but it seems that Brian has more talent. Brian has already participated in tough challenges, but now his opponent is too aggressive against him. We can also say that it is a battle of different techniques, and it is always very interesting to watch. Brian has his own artifact, he holds his favorite wooden sword, and we shouldn't forget that he recently ate a sacred peach. All this gives him confidence in his own abilities, especially after a year of constant training. The brown bear was shocked to see the skills of this guy. It seems that Brian has fully entered into symbiosis with nature. Previously, Gwanak thought it was impossible to do this, but now he realized how wrong he was. Now George looked quite uncertain and was visibly trembling due to fear of death. From the very beginning, he said that everything that would happen here would remain within this barrier. So if he decides to point his sword at someone else, the latter must always be ready to counterattack. Of course, George doesn't respect Brian. He considers him a loser who hasn't even found an experienced master for himself. He was about to activate his artifact and show Brian all his power, but he felt incredible pain, as if he had been struck by lightning. In a few seconds, he lost consciousness and fell to the ground. Brian did not understand anything. A little later, he and the bear came closer to him, and it looks like George is in a very bad situation now. When he aggressively used his weapon and hoped for its great power, his soul was completely absorbed, so he had no strength left. This is a very frightening part in the history of sacred artifacts that were made by demons, although it is unlikely that he will die. If the right person took the artifact in their hands, this mountain would start flying, because every sacred artifact is a treasure that can lift a mountain or dig a river. Before, Brian did not even realize that sacred artifacts have such great power. As soon as he took the weapon in his hands, he saw a flash of fire in front of him, something he had seen before. It's not hard to guess that it's time to meet the fiery Taoist again. This experienced craftsman immediately ran over and took the George in his hands to examine its condition. He cannot believe that the disciple of the Heavenly Wolf King has become so stupid in his personal kingdom. He started shouting at Brian and tried to understand why he did it, but the boy said it was only self-defense. Now the fiery Taoist is sure that this foolish boy will not be able to escape the true wrath of the Wolf King. He believes that he personally should have burned the body of this fool a year ago. He does not understand why the Heavenly Wolf King should suffer such a disaster as Brian. That is why the fiery Taoist now wants to burn all his airways and personally lead him to the Heavenly Wolf King. So we have one more battle ahead of us. Brian has met too many interesting characters today. Now it will be much harder for him because he is no longer fighting an apprentice, but an experienced master. His fiery and hellish attacks are a real danger to any living creature on this planet. Of course, Brian has learned a lot over the past year, and he is holding his sword and trying his best to defend himself from the fire attacks. But even with his weapon and the peach he ate, he is still too weak for now. Perhaps the artifact he was able to take from George can help him in this unequal battle. There is too much difference in experience and strength between these two warriors, and it is very difficult to stop the fire attacks. The bear was still in the tree and asked the boy to try using the nine-tailed fox artifact. The fire Taoist immediately heard these words and attacked the brown bear with fire. But Gwanak managed to say that Brian should put all his energy into it and use the artifact, no matter what elements he uses. Naturally, the boy began to worry that this artifact could consume his soul, just as it had done to George. But until he personally tries to do it, he will never know the answer to this question. So the decision was made very quickly, and this artifact immediately showed its full power. The fire Taoist was shocked that this brat dared to use an ancient artifact against him. But no matter how angry the experienced master was, he immediately felt the infernal power of the fox's attack. This attack shocked not only the master, but also the guy who used the artifact. It was really impressive. This attack can only be compared to a Godzilla attack. After that, there was fire everywhere, as if there had been a big explosion and no one was left alive. Brian decided to go look for a Gwanak, and it was at that moment that he felt his enemy begin to sneakily attack him from behind. It was really very painful. Brian had never felt such pain in his life. He immediately looked to the ground and saw that blood was dripping from his chest, and that was the real trouble. It seems as if the fire Taoist managed to inflict a very serious injury on the guy with his last strength. The master said that it was not enough that Brian had turned the disciple of the Heavenly Wolf King into a vegetable. He didn't stop there and decided to use an ancient artifact against an experienced master. The fire Taoist was going to punish the boy very severely for his behavior, and this was the last straw of his restraint. He started attacking Brian with all available methods, as if the guy was going to turn into a steak. It's not clear how he's still alive. No living creature in the galaxy can withstand such attacks. The fire Taoist came closer to him and said that he would never allow him to use his trick again. He is not going to kill him right now, because he believes that he must personally take him to the heavenly Wolf King. This will probably be a cruel revenge, and the Wolf King will probably want to kill him personally. At first, Brian started to worry that he was very seriously injured, but later he felt that the pain was getting less and less. It turned out that the active component of peach from the sacred peach tree helps him. A long time ago, the Monkey King would have wanted to get rid of possible damage, and so he got his own skin. He was invulnerable to a huge number of sacred artifacts and survived 49 days on the way of the 8. Despite the pressure created by the Buddha's 5 fingers, the skin saved him for 500 years. Dong always wanted a body that would make him invulnerable to death, so he got the immortality cages. Even the most brutal techniques invented by the messengers of death could not kill him, so in the future, even the king of the underworld stopped trying. It was then that Brian finally got what he wanted, and the active components of the peach began to work in his body. The body has apparatuses that are responsible for various metabolic actions, including the neutralization of poison. The guy's new liver filled his body with warm water from head to toe. Even an experienced master felt the energy coming from the boy. He did not understand how he could have the energy of water. Only now did the fire Taoist finally realize that this guy had a really incomprehensible divine basis. Brian does not understand how exactly all this happened, but in any case, he feels great. He has no more pain. Now he has prepared his artifact for the second round of a difficult confrontation. Now he has the powers of divine water, and water will always be stronger than any fire. The fire Taoist no longer feels as confident in his own abilities as he used to. Now he is starting to really panic and realizes that he is in a fragile position. Of course, he doesn't understand how this is possible, but it doesn't matter now. After a while, Brian lost consciousness, and the brown bear tried to wake him up. A little while later, he finally woke up and immediately tried to remember what had happened. Guanak doesn't understand what Brian did to make the whole place end up in the water. He had never seen anyone so skillful at manipulating ancient artifacts and inner powers before. The bear tried to hear something from the boy, but it seemed as if Brian was shocked by his actions. He made a real mess and couldn't even explain how he did it. The guy immediately found the body of the master and tried to find the flag responsible for removing the barrier. He put his hands in his pockets and found something very interesting, which immediately caught the boy's attention. The brown bear quickly explained that it was called a bag of treasures. In simpler terms, it is a magic pouch designed to preserve small and large artifacts. Prime thought that George should also have such a bag with him, but the bear replied that now was not the time to be silly. He is sure that now the assistants of the experienced fire master are rushing here, so they may get into more trouble. Without hesitation, Brian picked up the fire Taoist and carried him in an unknown direction. Guanak continued to panic. He realized that if Brian didn't run away, the bad guys would come here and find the peach tree. But this young, talented guy remained calm and smiled constantly. He asked the bear to wait a little bit. After that, he activated the solar wind execution technique with a second song art star. The process of compiling the falling leaves was immediately started. Nothing was clear, but very interesting. Even the Guanak had never seen such beauty with his own eyes, and he watched with his mouth open. It seems as if Brian is forcing the tree to absorb the body of a two-thermal Taoist for the sake of ripening a new fruit. It turned out that they started doing this in time because within a few seconds the Taoist assistants came here. The peach tree began to bloom and opened the barrier again, so they could not see the bear and Brian. However, it turned out that everything was not so perfect. If the experienced craftsman did not have the element of fire, Brian would have been able to grow a new fruit. Speaking of fruit, you need to learn about its potential medicinal properties. Given that this is a very precious and hidden treasure, only a couple of people in the world know about it. If nothing changed for Brian, then the fruit was not fully ripe, so it did not have enough effect. So the effect of the fruit varies depending on the size and the amount of time it took to ripen. Even now, by passing water through the liver, the strength begins to grow. I wonder what will happen if you eat a ripe fruit. After that, the brown bear started to feel a little shy because he decided to ask the boy to show him the environment behind this barrier. It turns out that the mountain deity can walk the streets of the city. All it takes is the release of his alter ego. But he needs extra strength for this, which is terrible, because even if people come here, no one brings anything interesting with them. Now that their paths have crossed, The bear will be able to see the world and various interesting things thanks to Brian. The guy agrees to these conditions, but in return, he also wants to get something from the deity. The bear quickly agreed to these terms and gave him a donation. Of course, this is a rather strange gift, especially considering that it is the name of a peanut snack that looks like a mace. It's time for some new lessons from a Gwanak history teacher. For a long time, someone strange has been appearing in East Asia, including the Korean peninsula. A fantasy race with intellectual abilities. They were called goblins, and they had not only incredible physical abilities. These guys were also born with a spiritual foundation. Their nature is incredible. They created special tools that made their abilities more precise. And this is the legendary mace of the goblins that the brown bear has just been talking about. Finally, Brian realized what he was holding, but he had read that this object could only be used by its owner. That's true, but it's an important treasure that can be exchanged with goblins for anything. The goblin helmet and mace are not artifacts that can be created twice, and the loss of each means that the owner has lost half of their power. Brian can now make the owner of the "Was You Do Anything" if he starts blackmailing him properly. Judging by all these stories from the bear, it looks quite interesting, and in any case, Brian didn't expect anything special. After that, he agreed to take the bear with him, and the Gwanak was incredibly happy. He was excited because he had long dreamed of finally seeing the world and all its good sides. Brian said that now was the perfect time to go work in the garden with Lady Pinafore. With the new year upon us, the summit will be held on the 31st of this month, and the country's leadership is preparing to meet mayors and top celestials. According to rumors, the reason for this summit is the Tower of Babel. At least that's what ordinary people say. I need to say a few words about the Tower of Babel, which is unique because it was built by people. It was built so that it could reach heaven and exist before the gates of heaven close. Thanks to today's dynasty of celestials, it has been reconstructed in the Babylonian style. Brian was riding in a taxi and didn't think about any towers. He was relaxed until something interesting happened. The car started braking very abruptly, which happened because the person stepped into the middle of the road. The guy could not understand what exactly happened. Only later he saw the cause of the incident. At first he thought that a monster had appeared in front of the car, but then he looked more closely and realized that it was quite different. Carol, a girl who works with Lady Pinafore, was standing in front of the car, and she looked at the guy and ordered him to get out of the car. Once he did what she wanted, she explained that she had been asked to become his partner for a while. She also said that it was the lady's order, and she cared little whether Brian would listen to it. But she immediately warned me that if her name was involved in any problems because of him, he would pay dearly for it. Brian immediately started smiling and assured me that everything would be fine. All this time, a bear disguised as a popsicle was with him. He recognized this girl and realized that Brian would have a hard time with her. He said he knew some information about her and also knew her weaknesses. And of course, he had already learned that this girl likes model-looking guys. For many years, a very handsome man, known for his elegance, lived on the island. According to rumors, he was very handsome and was also the son of a deity. He was called Moon. One day, an ordinary girl named Carol accidentally saw him swimming. Of course, she was shocked by this, but it was this moment that awakened her spiritual foundation. She immediately felt her inner strength begin to fill up. Even though the gates of heaven were closed, Brian can't believe that she awakened her divine power just by looking at this guy. He thinks the Gwanak is lying. The guy thinks it's absolutely impossible, but according to rumors, there are people who have performed their abilities when their minds and bodies were in a state of shock. These people were chosen and raised by deities from the human world, and because Carol had the same foundation as the Moon family, she was accepted into their midst. Carol is a very self-confident girl who knows what she wants. She was constantly pursuing her moon. But obviously, as this guy perceived her, she was just an ordinary young celestial without connections or support. When she realized that he had no reason to see her, she realized that she had to create those reasons on her own. In less than 100 years, Carol was able to conquer Jeju Island and show incredible progress. It became known as a flower that will reach heaven and destroy the whole world if you don't pick it, i.e. the wilted flower of the Asura. Having created a dynasty, Carol officially proposed to Moon to tie the knot. But Moon and his father were scared and came up with a plan to get Carol out. When she was preparing for her wedding and dreaming of a happy future, the father and son talked about the plan with all the residents of Jeju Island. When the wedding day came, strange things started happening right from the start, but Carol didn't even realize it. She was visited by real mercenaries, and it is unlikely that they came to congratulate her on her wedding. They started attacking the girl and said they wanted the wilted Sura flower to finally die. Instead of seeing her favorite and beloved Moon, She saw professional killers. She was so angry that it was even scary to look into her eyes. She could no longer contain her inner feelings and aggression and began to attack these mercenaries. From the first minutes of the battle, they already began to regret coming that day to destroy it. Despite the fact that many murderers came that day, none of them could escape her punishment. The battle of that day was documented as a battle that nearly swallowed Jeju Island. But in the end, it was Carol who was the loser, as she was the one who was betrayed by her love. Although she defeated all these mercenaries, she did not feel any better, and her eyes were still filled with tears. She was approached from many places because of her abilities, and various guys with beautiful faces were sent to her. Very quickly, everyone learned that she liked handsome men, but none of them survived. If it wasn't for her friend, the Berry Princess, who intervened, Carol would have been kicked off the island long ago. Bear thinks that Brian should be happy because this girl will have no reason to hate him. Guanik thinks that Brian's appearance is not to Carol's taste at all. Carol told me they were already there, so I had to immediately apologize to her for my behavior and start hurrying. Later, she explained that there are 6 gardens in this lady's building. Each garden is looked after by a different person, and among these gardens, Brian can only be in the 6th garden. The boy immediately began to think that the 6th garden was the least important place, and that he would hardly be allowed to approach the important medicinal herbs right away. When they opened the gate of the 6th garden, Brian was shocked. He could not believe that there were 2 sons. But still, this place looks too terrible, as if no one has looked after it for more than 1,000 years. Each garden gate is in a different time frame and exists in different parts of the world. Brian now has to take care of the 6th garden personally. This place has been closed since the death of the last ruler hundreds of years ago. As the world changes and the number of celestials increases, the importance of common herbs is rapidly increasing, so the 6th garden is finally open. But that doesn't mean he has to work here without pay. When the plants grow, Brian will earn a lot and won't have to share with anyone. Suddenly, Carol's phone started ringing and fell out of her pocket, and Brian couldn't help but notice. He saw that she was playing a tune on her phone, and it looked like she was getting a call from a nice guy. He immediately recalled flashbacks of recent stories about this girl and felt sick. Brian has to be very careful, because if he says something bad now, he will get into trouble. A little later, he said he respected her, and then lost consciousness for a while. When he opened his eyes, he saw a brown bear in front of him, and he waited for a long time for Brian to wake up. The bear said that he had been waiting for this for more than 2 hours, and during this time, he had become hungry. He told the guy that it was a very good shot. It was the first time he had ever seen anything like it. He must be referring to the Carol kick, which was the first time he had ever seen someone perform this kick without adding any technique. So only now Brian realized that he had been beaten by a girl, but it was normal. He told us that even though this garden was the worst of all, only the best plants had already managed to grow, so their quality and taste were incredible. In any case, Carol said that they will keep an eye on how well Brian is doing, and this will continue until the next season. If he can demonstrate a few of his important abilities, he will be entrusted with growing more important plants, such as the sacred peach tree. Or perhaps he will be even luckier and be entrusted with even more precious plants. He must use this opportunity to become even stronger than he is right now, so that he no longer falls prey to the games of more powerful people. Brian decided that he would not allow anyone else to touch him or his family in the world of uncontrollable celestials. In order to realize all his intentions, he needs to do something with this field, which has not been touched for many years. Everything is a mess, as if there was a huge fire. He took out the weapon of the legendary Taoist fire master and thought that he was too cruel last time. This master has saved his life several times in the past, and he is very grateful for it. The bear watched the boy's prayers and could not believe that he was doing it sincerely. It's just a plant. He couldn't have taken it to heaven without doubt and compassion. But the guanic knows this guy too little and underestimates his potential. It turned out that Brian is capable of much more than others expect from him. The bear could not believe that this was possible, but if you look at the boy, he was not surprised at all by his own actions. A peach tree that was burned and needed a month of rest now takes only 4 seconds to grow back to its original size. It really looks incredible. After this guy should be called the King of Plants. He does this through the solar wind execution technique, the 9th star of the art of song. The trees seem to have risen from the dead, and he said he would allow them to be in charge of the duties of experienced farmers. They listened to their master and immediately started working on this garden. The brown bear is not able to hide his surprise at all, which is understandable because he has never seen anything like this before. The ability to bring trees to life is a skill that requires a lot of effort, even for high-level celestials. But Brian did it like a true master. After that, the guy said he was tired and it was time to rest. He had spent too much energy on this case. The brown bear did not mind the extra rest and gave the boy a date that had just ripened. When they entered the house of this garden, they saw that it was much more spacious than they had expected. The previous ruler of the sixth garden was called Puck, as it was written in the memoirs of this house. At the moment, Brian wants to restore his energy using breathing techniques. He has spent a lot of energy restoring the garden. The guy calmly plunged into the process of meditation, but suddenly saw something strange that he had never seen before. He was immediately frightened and got to his feet, although he is not sure what just happened. It seems as if he heard the call of the plant, as if the plant responded to his breath. It seems as if this plant or plants are on the lower floor of this building. Brian is not sure, but maybe he should use the seeds left over from the date he just ate. He made a small weapon out of them and began to make a hole in the floor, a turn of events that even the bear did not expect. In a few seconds, there was a huge hole in the floor and they began to fall into it. At the last moment, the bear grabbed the boy and saved him from falling, and now they can see what's under them. Gvanak explained that it was a special barrier that was painted with blood. The person who did this most likely felt intense hatred, and this is already quite strange. There must be something from below, because the call that Brian felt during the breathing exercises came from below. Now he is convinced that he has to break this barrier, and he is not at all interested in what this might lead to. After a few minutes of active work, he managed to do it, and they finally saw that there was another room downstairs. Some unknown force picked up Brian and Gvanak, and it turned out to be the Lord of the Sixth Garden, Pak. He summoned the new garden manager to tell him about the evil deeds of Lady Pinakwa. One day he was walking home from a breakup with his friends. He accidentally stumbled upon the sanctuary of a deity and was possessed by a ghost, and he could do nothing about it. At the same time, a kindly scientist who was passing by helped him get rid of the ghost with the help of red beans, which he scattered nearby. But he explained that if the ghost chose him, it meant that his spiritual foundation had finally awakened. If he leaves everything as it is and stays in the world of people, he will be persecuted by people who are obsessed with gaining the power of celestials. Therefore, it is better to leave this place before he gets into trouble. The scientist asked him not to worry. He knew a certain celestial being, so he would only have to follow his orders. That's how Puck got to the pavilion of Lady Pinakwa, and he was told that if he worked hard and practiced, he would become stronger. But because he was born an ordinary person, his desire to become a high-level celestial was like counting stars in the sky. He did all his work without any progress, and then his debt became his limit. He believed he could do something about it, but he was wrong, and only realized it later. When he was about 30 years old, he met a girl who looked like him, who also came from the world of people with an awakened divine basis. He was shocked by the reason why this child ended up in such a place, because it was the same reason as his. He finally realized that he was possessed by a ghost, but not because he had entered the sanctuary of a real deity. It was the scientist who sent this ghost to him so that his spiritual basis would finally awaken, and then made him come here. After studying the stories of other people, he realized that he could not live his entire life as an ordinary servant. That is why he bowed down in supplication to all the masters of the earthly arts he knew to teach him. Every time he was given some drops of information, he tried to implement them. But his mortal body, which had no strength, was getting weaker every year. While he was in such a weak state, they even managed to come up with a terrible nickname for him, Foxtail. Every time he bent down to do his work, he was compared to a foxtail growing everywhere. When this started happening all the time, he started thinking about suicide for the first time. It happened because he was always unhappy, but after that, a real miracle happened. Lady Pinakwa appeared and thanked him for his suffering and efforts and made him the ruler of the sixth garden. She rewarded him with the martial arts of the earth element, the art of the earth dragon, which was passed down from master to master. After that, he promised not to forget the mercy of Lady Pinakwa and swore to fulfill his obligations as the lord of the sixth garden until his death. From that day on, he devoted himself to studying the art of the earth dragon, practicing in the sixth garden. His power grew with each passing day and finally reached the level of a mystical celestial. But despite what he was able to accomplish, his body began to become even weaker. Only then did he finally understand the secret of the earth dragon arts. The effect of the earth dragon art is incredible, but the power was absorbed by the very medicinal herbs around it, not by it. He turned into a living fertilizer, although he did not realize it, and only then did he realize that he did not have long to live. Brian had only seen stories like this on TV before, and it's hard to believe that even celestials do something like this. It's horrifying. But the guy believes that there is nothing unusual in this whole situation. Brown Bear explained that this is a common practice. Celestials do such things to maintain their comfort. Brian is now scared because he would not want to become someone like the foxtail. He will not allow himself to be sacrificed like the pack. If someone was able to break through the barrier that he created with his blood and life, then there is no doubt that this person is strong enough. Park hopes that the Bryans will have enough strength to burn down the pavilion, and that his followers will help him do so. They will keep the hidden treasures and protect them at the cost of their own lives. Probably he means those things of the coma that lay next to his will. These are the seeds of the mandrake mountain that grew over the ocean, also called the ghostly scream of ginseng because they scream to take away the soul. They also found something similar to a container from which people in the temple draw lots. It's all strange because the call that answered the boy came not from the seed, but from this. Does he have to grow this plant like everything else? At that moment, there was a big explosion, and they were all thrown back several meters. So this thing doesn't want to sprout at all. It looks like it will have to be in this form. It's not clear what kind of object it is. If you look at it carefully, it looks like a sword handle. But where is the blade? Meanwhile, Lady Pinafore was visited by new guests, and all her assistants gathered to welcome them. The lady was very pleased that her guest had taken the time to come to this modest place. It turned out that the master of the sanctuary, Mrs. Sandra, came to see her personally. She realizes that this will sound rather rude, but she wants to get down to the important business at hand. She had already heard that inside this palace there is a treasure that is important to her. That is why she came here to get the property that was lost during the scandalous events 100 years ago. This treasure is called the hilt of the seven-pointed sword. And that is why the master of the sanctuary came here. She wants to return what belongs to her. If we talk about the seven-pointed sword, I must say that it was a rather strange artifact. The same can be said about the place where it was created, because it was a state that could not be founded. All this is because of the three states. Only this state did not have the strength to support itself. It is called a Pashin. The power was founded by a strong ruler who had an unclear basis. One of the states was founded by the son of a Pinakwa lady. But this was possible with the blessing of the spirits and ancestors of the Korean peninsula. But the king founded the Pekchi with the help of human forces without support. He awakened his earthly foundation and received the element of gold late. He was a rare genius, and thanks to him, the Peshe was in its prime. But over time, his successors were weaker, and so the state began to decline. The traces of the strong king soon disappeared. There was only one person who resembled him, because this man was a genius like the king. He was called a prince, and this sword was a rare artifact that he made. The sword was kept on a remote archipelago. Lady Pinakwa believes that this handle was supposed to be passed along with the blade, and this information is known to everyone. But it turned out that in the past, the ambassador who was supposed to bring this sword with him had been in a disaster and died. The ship he was on was quickly found, but there was only a blade and no handle. In other words, the master of the sanctuary claims that the sword must have a hilt. Lady Pinakwa finds this rather strange, as if they realized the possibility of the handle's existence only recently. So the lady wants to know why Ms. Sandra is questioning everyone around her about this artifact. Sandra said that she had come a long way, not just to ask stupid questions. She is here on behalf of the sanctuary to offer a celestial battle in 6 months. A celestial battle is a method used by celestials to resolve a conflict peacefully. They will argue over the blade of a seven-pointed sword, and if the shrine wins, they will take the hilt from the temple of the Lady Pinakwa. Of course, if this hilt is here, Sandra will not tell anyone about what she saw in this temple. The lady is ready to accept these conditions, but she wants to ask for one more important condition. Regardless of how this conversation ended, it is now time to look at what happened 6 months later. According to rumors, this celestial battle will be broadcast live, and it was Lady Pinakwa who said she wanted to show it to the whole world. Now these guys have come to the sixth garden. They will check its progress, and their boss asked them to behave calmly. When the doors of the sixth garden opened, they saw a real paradise. It's hard to believe that 6 months ago there was a desert here. It's an incredible change in a short time. Brian personally met his guests. He was reading a book and enjoying the fruits of the trees. They were unhappy that he was sitting like a king and enjoying a delicious melon instead of meeting them respectfully. They want at least a little respect from him, and Brian has no problem with that. He stood up, walked over to them, and told them his name, and a little later told them that he was the one in charge of the sixth garden. A guy named Lee greeted him and said he came to check on his progress. Brian showed his characterization and said that he did not understand why he should consider them his older brothers. All of these people were incredibly shocked to see that he had reached the level of a celestial deity. Very quickly, they went to fulfill his orders because he was the senior officer. Lee spoke about the upcoming celestial battle, where 2 players from each rank, from celestial to supreme, will fight against the Japanese side. It turned out that Brian was completely unaware of this information because he rarely leaves the 6th Garden. It turned out that the young warrior Lee would also take part in this battle. During the Korean War, he pursued his spiritual foundation through the shock of losing his family in an explosion, and later ended up in the ladies' pavilion. Lee is a very talented young man with abilities who shines brightly with happiness after meeting the master. Although Brian doesn't trust other Celestials, this guy seems kind and honest enough. Lee also told us about a guy named Paul, who is rumored to be an incredible Celestial soon. People also say that he is a blood relative of the son of Lady Pinaqua, that is, King Daniel. The young warrior is incredibly happy to participate in the same competition with someone as talented as Paul. The sanctuary accepted the lady's offer, and everyone has known about it for a long time. They are very much supported by mortals because the shrine has killed several monsters. If you help ordinary people with their everyday problems, you can easily gain the support of the people. This is exactly what the young disciple of the immortal Donald, a girl named Ruth, does, sometimes killing monsters in the city. Soon one of the assistants came to Lady Pinafore and told her that the ruler of the 6th Garden wanted to see her. She remembered this arrogant guy and ordered him to wait until she finished her tea with her family. But it turned out that Brian decided to personally challenge Paul, the celestial deity we recently talked about. Paul immediately prepared for the battle and said that he saw nothing wrong with it. At this point, Helen started to speak. She had already heard rumors that Paul was deliberately stuck at his rank because he was afraid to fight stronger opponents. If he doesn't like these rumors, he should accept Brian's challenge and fight him. Lady Pinaqua completely agrees with Helen's words, but can Paul defeat the Lord of the 6th Garden? The guy looked incredibly motivated and angry. He said he was ready for a fight, and soon everything was organized. All members of the lady's family gathered to watch their relative fight. Of course, there were also many servants and lords of other gardens, and this battle interested many people. The master of the 6th Garden, Brian, looked quite calm and relaxed as usual. The celestial deity, a relative of Lady Pinaqua's son Paul, on the other hand, was very angry and aggressive. He looked at his opponent with anger and said that he would not blame him for suffering a lot. It seems that he wants to kill the owner of the 6th Garden today. Even though it's just a regular fight, Brian quickly realized that this would be an advantage for him because his opponent was too angry and it would hinder him during the fight. Soon the battle of the Celestials will officially begin, and it promises to be a very intense one. The young polo player is not used to spending much time defending himself. His strong suit is attacking. From the very beginning, Brian realized that he had to be very careful and attentive. If everything is done correctly, he should win this battle because he has made great progress in the last 6 months in the 6th Garden. He was able to stop the opponent's first attack, although it was not easy because Paul is a pretty serious opponent. Paul believed that no one could block his attack with a simple plant shield, but Brian managed to do it. Now Paul is even more angry and promises that Brian can forget about this equipment forever, as well as about a quiet life, because now he will be disabled. It looks like the floor has prepared something really special for this battle. He is sure that soon Brian will die and Lady Pinafore will have to look for a new owner of the 6th Garden again. It seems as if during all this time of empty talk, the Brian's weapon had time to recharge. He's ready to activate the solar wind execution skill of the 2nd star of the art of song again. This attack is called solar exposure, and now this force will be directed against the floor. There is no doubt that this young, albeit talented artist is encountering such power for the first time. Only now he realized that Brian had been using an unusual defense all this time, a defense that absorbs the opponent's strength. It was such an aggressive attack that a third person had to intervene. He stopped the brothers and explained that they had to finish this battle because they could not be left without this child. Now it was obvious to everyone who won this battle, so a man named Christopher ended this competition. Of course, Paul did not agree with this decision and kept shouting that he was ready to continue the battle. However, Christopher was unwavering in his decision and told the lady that he believed Brian to be the winner. Although it was not very pleasant to admit it, she could not disobey such an experienced master. The ruler of the 6th Garden was surprised to hear that Lady Pinafore so easily accepted her nephew's defeat. He looked at the guy named Christopher and couldn't understand who he was, why the lady was listening to his words so much. Later, he approached Pinakwa in person, and she decided to ask him about the training he had been doing for the past 6 months. She seems to be stressed by his rapid progress lately, and she can't help but like it. The guy explained that due to the rarity of the wooden element, the pace of development of his martial arts is quite fast. He has also already learned that he got this position to grow something, and he is ready to do it right now. He assured her that if she trusted him, he would never betray her, and this is a pretty bold statement. The lady said that Brian should concentrate on the competition now, but she would definitely think about what he said. Although he wanted to ask a few additional questions, the lady told him to go rest. A little later, Lady Pinafore promised to find Brian a walking companion. Brian didn't mind it, but he didn't expect Christopher to be his partner. Only now have they fully gotten to know each other, and Christopher told us a little bit about himself. The Lord of the Sixth Garden noticed that compared to the way Christopher looked the first time they met, he was now very soft. In any case, Brian was very happy to finally get outside for a little walk. Soon they saw a shop where they made various delicious cocktails, and the boys quickly decided to try them. This is what a real martial artist looks like in real life. Despite the fact that Christopher had already heard various stories about the human world, he did not expect it to be so interesting. According to rumors, adult celestials intervene in the human world, but Christopher does so too rarely. When he first died in the human world, Lady Pinakwa helped him to become a celestial. He did not know that he would not be able to live in the human world. He wanted his name to be remembered after his death, but now it is clear that these were just childhood dreams. Being in the world of celestials, he constantly thought about what he did not have time to do here, and in the end, he remained an average ruler of the past. Then he thanked Brian for keeping him company in the world of people. It was a really great walk. While they were enjoying the beautiful weather, they managed to see people who continue to protest. People believe that human sacrifice is a terrible catastrophe, and we cannot turn a blind eye to the deaths of innocents. Human sacrifice is murder, and they believe that only mentally retarded people can advocate it. People want to make the celestial fools respect their rights. They are ready to stop even the Dragon King for this. Hearing this, Christopher could not believe that the head of this country was killing his own people, and how could such people still exist? He believes that this is all some kind of mistake and suggested that Brian immediately resolve and sort out the situation. This conversation ended immediately because an unexpected solar eclipse caught their attention. It is not clear what exactly is happening now, but it seems as if the people protesting need to be protected immediately. We had to act incredibly quickly because in a few seconds people were under attack. It is not yet clear who exactly is attacking the protesters. Perhaps it is the head of state's men. They might have been unhappy with all these protests, and that's why they decided to personally intervene in this situation. Brian acted very quickly and activated his ancient artifact to protect the population. He immediately began to attack the enemies, but even his speed was not enough. This incident made him realize that his rivals could be much stronger and more powerful than he was. They act in a very coordinated manner, as if they were members of one team. This made our protagonist even more angry, and he felt the same hatred for them that he feels for monsters. As soon as he was preparing for another attack, he felt something approaching him from above. Only at the last moment did he manage to dodge a huge stone falling on his head. He was approached by the boss of these bandits, a woman named Betty, and she did not expect to meet Brian in such a place. She believes that Brian is a traveler from a completely different world, and now she wants to take his life. He immediately felt her strong, dark energy and guessed that she was one of the patronesses of the Heavenly Wolf King. It was easy to do because he had already felt this yin energy before and felt it when the statue exploded. It seems as if she doesn't hide her desire to kill Brian at all. She must have been a close friend of George's. So all this can be called a vendetta. She is ready to make Brian pay for all his evil deeds, no matter what. When he heard about the evil deeds, he started to smile, as if she didn't know. But he tries to do only good deeds. Brian acts as he always does. He doesn't care who is standing in front of him. If he feels that he is fighting for the truth, he will stand to the last. One can envy his self-confidence. He has not recognized any authority for a very long time. Of course, Betty came well prepared and also confident in her success. But he asked her not to joke with him and said that she was the only one who had to pay for her evil deeds. After these words, Brian called a real team of wooden warriors to help him. Now we can call it a new technique. With these guys, it will be much easier to fight against a large number of opponents. Betty doesn't look so confident now. She has seen that her people cannot withstand the pressure of the wooden warriors. She started screaming and ordered her assistants to immediately call for help. There were some goblins that looked like ghosts, as if they were half imaginary. These spirits are very evil, and it will be difficult to defeat them with ents, and their number is too large. Brian was lucky that he had managed to buy a small smoking pipe at the store before, although he had no intention of using it now. But in a few seconds, he still absorbed a little tobacco smoke and felt the active component of mandrake. Now his concentration was improved, his sensory and reflex nerves showed maximum power, as well as his muscle tissue. He was very angry and promised that he would not spare anyone today. It's always a pleasure to see this guy's rapid progress, as he was not capable of doing this 6 months ago. But today we can feel its power, and we can talk about its experience a little bit, because this is not his first battle. Nevertheless, Betty smiled and said that it didn't matter how many more wooden boys he could summon. She believes that these entities help no more than a regular toothpick, so she and her people should not be afraid of them. She asked her assistants to summon even more demons and fight incredibly hard. It seemed that they were in control of the initiative in this battle, but suddenly everything did not go according to their plan. It seems that some dark force started fighting them. Most of the bandits started spitting blood and choking. Some could not move at all, and some began to hear strange words and voices in their heads. Even Betty did not understand what was happening, although she had recently enjoyed the initiative in this battle. Brian immediately ran over to her to check on her, even though they were enemies. This smoke is not at all dangerous for him, because it causes a detoxification process with the help of the liver and extracts all the useful components from it. This is all due to the mandrake component in his body, but for his enemies it is a real poison. Secondhand smoke turned out to be too harmful, and now Betty will remember it for the rest of her life. Although if you look at it more closely, it is difficult to understand whether it will survive until tomorrow morning. As it turned out, this girl always has an ace up her sleeve and is ready to use this advantage at a critical moment. When Betty felt she was on the verge of death, she immediately called her father for help. But very quickly it turned out that no one today could defeat a warrior named Christopher. Brian could not believe that Christopher was stronger than the Wolf King of Heaven. It's also strange that Betty turned out to be his daughter, as it was believed that she was only his student. Christopher said that he didn't care who the Wolf King was, only that he sinned too much before people. The Heavenly Wolf King laughed at these words and said that he was not as easy to defeat as everyone else thought. He asked us to listen carefully to his words before he killed all these puppies and sent them to hell. Because of Christopher's actions, he will now not spare anyone and will wage a real war here. I realized that this experienced master had begun the process of absorbing not only dead bodies, but also the power of the living people around him. Brian can't understand what is wrong with this warrior, why he is constantly doing bad things and hurting innocent people. It's immediately apparent that he's very strong, and he uses terrible songwriting. Even Brian is now starting to panic because he doesn't understand how to stop this tyrant. Brian began to think about using the nine-tailed fox artifact. He is not sure that this will work, but he sees no other way out of this situation. At that moment, Christopher approached him and asked to borrow his sword for a while. Realizing that this guy was really dangerous and a great warrior, Brian decided to trust him in this situation. Now we will finally see what this guy can do in real battles. Before that, it was usually just talk. His very first attack has already made others respect his martial art. Even Brian did not expect his new comrade to be such a skilled and fierce warrior. Christopher has no right to execute someone who is a celestial, even despite his sins against innocent people. But if we are talking about what the Skywolf did to his subjects, this is a completely different matter. Christopher, as one of the Celestials, is ready to take responsibility and carry out the necessary punishment. It seems that he does not care about the consequences and is willing to take risks. It is hard to believe that Christopher was able to defeat the Heavenly Wolf King so quickly.
Of course, it looked very cruel, but sometimes good must be cruel to evil.
If you are too soft all the time, you can lose an important battle. Thanks to the quick reaction of the general community of Celestials, all the terrorists were arrested. Now we are identifying the people who died and were injured in this battle. Of course, people are now even more dissatisfied with the government's actions, and the news spread very quickly throughout the island. There is also dissatisfaction with the actions of the Celestial community because their response was too slow. Footage from the scene of this event was posted on the internet, and everyone can now understand who the real heroes are by watching this video. If you pay close attention, one of these people in the video might look very familiar. People recognize the guy who, a year and a half ago, flew a huge bird in the city center and saved a woman. The news made Lady Pinaqua angry, and she ordered her assistant to turn off the TV because she couldn't watch it anymore. Christopher realizes that he has caused her a lot of trouble and is upset about it. He doesn't even have the qualifications to prove that he is a celestial being. He made a mistake by coming down to the world of people and doing this. He's ready to take any punishment from the lady, but right now she's focused on Brian. The woman doesn't understand how, after all they've done, he can look her straight in the eye. The guy immediately lowered his head and apologized for his behavior. The lady does not want to say that Christopher's actions were wrong, although she advises him to be more careful in the future. Then she looked at Brian and told him that he should prepare for a disciplinary punishment. The conversation with the Pinakwa lady was over, and the boys were free to go wherever they wanted. Brian immediately returned to his sixth garden, as if he hadn't been in this place for 1,000 years. Finally, he can test what he found during the battle with Betty and her bandits. He did not expect that someone would hide these books in a large statue. Perhaps there is some power in this. It looks like it's about the Sage of the Great One. He was called that after his death, the small guy from the family. This was done because he began to suppress the energy of the mountain when he founded a state near it. The one who wrote these words is undoubtedly the king of Sage Great. Brian was able to guess it without the help of the bear. It said that Sage knows that he has only a short time to live, but he is still not afraid of anything. He is only worried because of the thought that his own son will be the first to die, and he will have to see it with his own eyes. It is hard for him to see his son getting weaker and losing weight every day. A long time ago, there was a huge number of people who gave their own lives for the sake of the gods. Before the era of the rule of celestials over humans comes again, people who have not yet awakened their divine basis need to gain strength. They will also need the courage to fight celestials. On a distant island, there are letters called runes, and if you use them correctly, they can show their power and strength. It looks like poetry with enormous power within the words. It seems the king wanted to create power from a language system similar to the tongue of an oracle. This guy's mind was popular even among celestials, and if he had lived 100 years longer, he might have done it. If someone can read and write, they can learn how to activate their power and use the power of runes. The king's last wish was to keep these 28 symbols alive, and he hopes that his work will continue to live on. It seems as if the future that the great king dreamed of so much has finally arrived. These mysterious but very interesting books have fallen into the hands of a young and talented boy, and now it's time to see how he uses them. He quickly began practicing and trying to master this ancient technique. He was shocked to see his true attack technique, as well as its incredible potential and power. It's all about the power that is imprisoned in these words and sounds. The main thing is to pronounce it as in the instructions for people. It says that if you can visualize the words in your head, you can use their power if you say them out loud. As soon as Brian said the word fire in the correct language, he immediately saw a fire in front of him. We need to capture this moment, because now Brian is reaching a completely different level of skill. If he mastered all these techniques correctly, he would become incredibly powerful and strong. All this time, the brown bear Gwanak had been sleeping peacefully, but now he was woken up by a noise in the street. He can't understand why Brian is trying to burn everything he has at hand. It seems as if the guy doesn't know how to make a proper campfire without the support of a bear, so he decided to have some fun. Brian said that sometimes he wants to go overboard, but he still has to be careful not to burn anything else. The boy also noticed that the louder he spoke, the bigger the fire became. This means that he needs to speak this word as if it were a god louder if he wants to squeeze out its full potential. Or perhaps the louder the word, the more power it absorbs, and the more people say it, the greater the effect. Of course, all this is just a theory in Brian's head, and he will have to find answers to all his questions in the future. Perhaps it's completely different if he uses a long sentence instead of a single word, then the effect will be much greater. He raised his hands up and asked the sky to help him find answers to all these questions. But of course, there were no answers. Because of all his stupid behavior, he didn't notice when a guest suddenly came to visit him. He hasn't seen Carol, also called the wilted flower of the Asura, in person for a long time. The guy immediately started sweating because he realized that she could have been standing there for a long time watching him act like a fool. The most interesting thing about this story is that now she raised her hands up and began to ask the sky to help him. It seems that they are perfect for each other, a family of mentally retarded monkeys. Then the girl laughed and asked him not to worry. She thinks it's normal to behave like that sometimes. When Carol smiles and she does it sincerely, it seems that nothing else in this world matters at all. In response, Brian began to get visibly agitated and did not know how to react to these words. Was it really love? Finally, the time had come to ask her why she had come here today in the first place. The girl replied that she had heard that Brian was participating in the heavenly battle, and she also learned about his rapid progress and victory over the floor. Carol also said that she will also participate in the heavenly battle. She went outside to better prepare for this event and better understand all the nuances, but she found something for him. She was supposed to always keep an eye on him, although she didn't do it at all, and it was probably no longer necessary. After these words, she gave him something that looked like a book, and he was allowed to read it because he was participating in the heavenly battle. At first, Brian could not understand anything. He wondered who exactly gave him this gift. The answer was incredibly unexpected, because Carol said that his father had given him this gift. Brian immediately began to tremble with anger, looked at the girl carefully, and asked her what kind of man dared to call himself his father. In ancient times, a divine regent descended from heaven to Mount Pektu and gave wormwood root and garlic to a bear and a tiger who wanted to become human. The tiger immediately began to run away after that, but the bear withstood being fed garlic and root in the cave. After that, he turned into a woman named Karen, after which the divine regent and Karen created a new history. This is the most interesting and popular myth among people, and the myth is that Karen was not the legal wife of the regent. Now, it turned out that Brian has a father. He is married to the younger princess of the divine regent and lives in the neighboring city of Shenfu. She had finished all her business in this city and was about to return when his father approached her. He said that it would soon be restless and wrote some important things in this writing. That's all he passed on. Brian was pleasantly surprised because he had always believed that his father had forgotten about the family union and had run away. He spent his fortune for his own pleasure, and all his debts were transferred to his mother and grandmother. Despite this, his father did not take the blame, and after that, his grandmother died very quickly. Now, it has become clear that this man has probably found a new family. It is not known how he was accepted there, but now he is part of the family of an influential person, so his past family means nothing to him. It turned out that he passed on not only the scriptures, but also a very important object. I opened the box and saw a closed mystical bamboo fan. The scripture in the form of a fan was created to catch demonic animals and evil spirits with its help. A 24-plate fan is considered to be of very high quality, and the more plates, the better the fan is considered to be. This fan has 72 plates. It is not known why the father gave his son something so incredible. This fan was of sufficient quality to absorb a large number of evil spirits. Of course, Brian said he would use it, because otherwise he would be the last fool not to accept such a treasure. He began to assure Carol so strongly that he would use this gift that it began to look quite strange. He also received instructions on how to use the fan, because otherwise it would be difficult for a beginner to master this technique. In the following weeks, Brian continued to train hard and improve all his skills. One fine day, he saw a visitor in his garden, and of course he recognized Christopher at once. Christopher thinks it's incredibly beautiful here, and thanks to Brian, this place will never look like a desert again. Now it's time to talk business. Christopher has come here to ask for something. He wants to make a flute with Brian. History says that the flute brings peace. It appeared after the unification of the forces, but in fact it was created much earlier. A long time ago, when even the sages could not interfere, the human age was perfect. But without the intervention of the wise men, the dragons from the three seas started a war, as if they were expecting this, and there would have been an incredible number of victims. To stop all this suffering, all three states joined forces. That's how an instrument that can be used against dragons appeared. It was called a flute. Since this mom is incredibly strong, they began to impose restrictions on him. Firstly, the flute could not be imported into the country, and secondly, it could not be used against the people of this country. She was entrusted to the force because she is close to the strongest dragon king of the Eastern Sea, but now her whereabouts are unknown. Now Christopher has decided to create a new tool, and Brian needs to know what ingredients are needed because he is the owner of the sixth garden. Since the heavenly battle will soon begin, the borders of the flower garden will weaken, at which time Christopher is going to get the black jade bowl. But if everything really works out, we shouldn't forget that there will be suspicion from the Pinafore lady. We must also remember the possibility of a new war with the dragons, who will immediately want to destroy this flute. But Christopher is ready to take full responsibility for this situation. Probably all this is connected with the past situation when he saw the protests of ordinary people. At the time, he could not believe that the head of this country was killing his own people. This situation affected him too much. We must admit that he is different from other wise men, and that is why Brian is ready to help him. Brian is a man of the people, and the idea that there are people like Christopher makes him very happy. Brian said that he, on the contrary, very much doubted that he would be useful to such a wise man. Christopher immediately started laughing out loud and said that he knew Brian would not refuse to help. He is a really good friend. First, you need to find a place where there is a simple tree that is ideal for making a flute. Soon, the two went in search of such a tree. They could not make a mistake, otherwise the flute would not have its own characteristics. Brian was very surprised to see a whole huge island floating in the air. He didn't know that it was possible to get here through the dump door, but Christopher explained everything right away. The ladies' pavilion is a set of spaces, so if you touch the structure of the formula, you can enter this place. A little while later, a real horse appeared in front of them, as if Christopher had been waiting for it, a horse named Garmy. At that moment, Christopher immediately asked his friend to take his hands, and a combat uniform appeared on his body. They got on a horse together and started to move in an unknown direction. Christopher assured Brian that he shouldn't worry or be afraid of anything. Everything would be fine. But so far it was just words because, as it turned out, they were being chased by huge fish. Not only were there ordinary sharks, but you could also see an octopus and a crab. Because of these monsters, Christopher cannot enter the island. He asked Brian to trust him and try to find the right tree on this island on his own. It quickly became clear that there were plenty of dangerous monsters on this island, so it would be fun. Brian decided to smoke some mandrake again, and this component was immediately absorbed by his body. While Brother Christopher is trying to cover for him, we need to finish this task as quickly as possible. Brian immediately felt an unusual aura coming from the two places, and it would be ideal to find a jade bowl there. But in order to find the right items, you have to stay focused, because there are too many scary animals around. These are not ordinary wolves and foxes as in a classic forest, but some mutated animals of large size. He immediately felt that some of the monsters were on a celestial level, or even higher, so he was at a great disadvantage. It was getting darker by the minute, and the monsters around us were getting bigger and bigger. The guy realized that using mandrake again would not help, so he had to invent something new. Monsters will not wait for him to choose the right tactics. They will attack right now. But Brian is sure that his father's gift will come in handy in this critical situation. His attack was really incredibly impressive, fast and powerful. This was enough to defeat a large number of reptilian monsters. But then it got even more interesting. As it turned out, Brian decided to call for help from something else very interesting. He was always carrying a guanac with him, so now he can take advantage of its strengths in this difficult moment. He asked the brown bear to turn into a larger monster and help destroy these reptiles. Brian enjoyed watching the guanacos kill all those little rats. Now it is clear that he is not called the mountain fire deity for nothing, but this is not his true image either. Now it's time to talk a little bit about Mount Guanac. It has a mountain peak shape that looks like fire, and that makes it a volcano. The ancestors believed that fires would be easy to ignite in the capital, overlooking this mountain. To extinguish the fire, a pond was dug and a bronze statue was installed on the top of the mountain. And for hundreds of years, it stopped the energy of Mount Guanac. Suddenly, the big reptiles started running away, and it's not surprising that they run away where they feel strong energy. Besides, this black jade bowl probably eats more than half of the island's nutrients. The bear and Brian followed the direction of the reptiles and saw where the ugly guys were running away. Soon, Brian finally saw what he had been searching for, a black jade bowl. Meanwhile, the bear asked to be brought down to the ground, saying that he wanted to fry these nasty rats. It's always a pleasure to watch animals and humans work together as a team, and this symbiosis looks killer. At such moments, you realize that Guanac is indeed a very powerful deity, although when he is in a different form, he looks like an ordinary fluffy toy. He came closer to the jade bowl and realized that his fire was about to have serious problems. The bear began to panic and immediately called for Brian to come and save him. Of course, the ruler of the sixth garden, Lady Pinafore, does not abandon his friends in difficult situations. He quickly used his strengths and managed to save the brown bear. They came closer and saw that there was a het puppy in this place, a blue dog with an interesting ornament on its face. Brian started to ask how many dogs like this there might be around, and the bear replied that they were very vile creatures. It is not uncommon to meet those who have the appearance of a divine beast, and as a mediator, tame such dogs. The reason why the brown bear could only watch and see his energy being sealed was because of one nasty guy. The bear looked at the He-Tu and said that this child was about 200 years old. It was strange that he was still called a child. He needs to grow up and learn about the world at this age, and seeing that he cannot resist technology can lead to the conclusion that he has not learned the basics. Brian smiled broadly and assured the brown bear that everything would be fine. The bear immediately began to panic because he realized what the boy was going to do, but it was too late. With his new fan, he began to use a strange technique. In a few seconds, the het dog and the brown bear were trapped in this fan like ordinary spirits. They met inside and finally got to know each other. The encounter did not go well because despite the difference in size, the Hiti decided to attack the brown bear. Brian was very happy and told the two animals that they were perfect for each other. After that, he prepared to pick up all the necessary items and move on. Soon everything was successfully done, and he and Christopher returned to the pavilion. Everything seemed to end well, but soon Brian saw that his new friend was seriously injured. Christopher immediately assured the guy that if he rested enough time, his wound would heal quickly. He asked me not to pay much attention to it and said that he had a special gift for the brothers. It can be called a payment for help. Brian really deserves it. It turned out that this garden was protected by twin dragons, so there were difficulties. At first he wanted to keep it for himself, but then he realized that he had to give the dragon pearl to Brian. He asked me not to be too surprised because he believes it is an absolutely fair reward. Whatever his intentions, he must forget about the mercy of his godmother. But we must not forget that if the plan of these two guys is successful and they create a flute, it will be difficult to avoid the wrath of the Pinaqua lady. Brian decided to help his friend a little bit to get to his restroom. He promised that soon he would be strong enough to call Christopher his big brother and not be ashamed of it. Soon the broadcast of the battle for the championship will begin. It will take place on an island in the Eastern Sea. The attitude of these soldiers is surprising even before the battle begins, and it is clear that they are all incredibly motivated. All of them are preparing for a very fierce confrontation and are ready to give everything they have to win. These competitions are different from what happened in the past. Now the winner stays and fights a new opponent. I watched Christopher and saw total confidence in him. He did not show that he was seriously wounded at all. Before the start of the competition, representatives of the sages from each country send greetings to the Dragon King of the Eastern Sea. Through these references, they hope that the Dragon King will understand what it means to hold a competition at sea in the domain of the Dragon King. It is said that this means making a sacrifice, but in any case, preparations for the battle go on without pause. After that, work begins on temporarily filling the sea for the battle, and the two islands immediately become much hotter in a few seconds. You can't see this in real life. It can be called the power of the ancestors. Also, foreign observers of descendants will appear on one part of the island. They are here for a fair trial. They say that along with the inspection, each representative invited a high-ranking official to fulfill their conditions. All of them will be watching for justice and will do their job very carefully. Until a winner is determined, they vow to protect Lady Pinaqua's wealth at the cost of their own lives. There is also a person who speaks for the one. He will judge fairly with all his honesty. Also, until it is decided who won, they swore to protect the seven swords at the cost of their own lives. At this point, Brian started having problems. He felt a serious resonance. He took with him an object that he found in the house of the ruler of the sixth garden, and this object reacts to the seven-headed sword. This handle is connected to the sword, which is why it reacts to the strong energy. Brian immediately grabbed the object and tried to calm him down and not show him what was in his pocket. The entire process has already been launched, and the competition will begin soon. The broken sword apologized for the behavior of his sword. Sometimes when they meet their opponents, he reacts very actively. Although, of course, he noticed that this was a very strange behavior, even for this sword, because despite the fact that it had no owner, it showed such a reaction. If it is really a sword that can match the divine power of a fencer, his level of spirit must be very high. Brian could not take his eyes off this sword. He felt some kind of connection with this weapon. The broken sword can be called a weapon destroyer, a name given to it because its grip is so strong that there is no sword that can withstand it. Even among the ancestors of the Valhalla, he is the owner of a human skeleton with incredible fighting power. There are too few like him. He is also called a biowolf. If it were not for the wishes of the biowolf, the hilt of their swords would probably have jumped out of the treasure chest due to the resonance with the blade. Probably the whole reason is hidden in the fact that Brian was the one who had the hilt of the seven swords. Our old friend, a warrior named Lee, will fight first. He will have to fight against an opponent called Ahmad, who is at a fairly high level of training. Of course, he has already become a friend to the Lay, so today he will be rooting for him. It turned out that Helen was sitting next to Brian, and she said that it was all a big pity. Brian knows that this girl was a member of the family he saw when he was accepted into his current class. She said that he should watch the fight and understand everything for himself. She hates explaining obvious things. It is unclear why she talks about pity, but soon Brian will be able to personally understand the reasons for her words. Ahmed has already started using his fighting techniques. He looks really powerful and aggressive. Lee must demonstrate his full potential and incredible talent to stop this attack. Of course, he also has enough tools to fight strong opponents on equal terms and not give in to them. Since childhood, this guy has loved constant training, so his progress has reached great levels at a young age. Thanks to his perfect defense, he was able to dodge the attacks of the Ahmad and quickly approached his opponent. It was noticeable that Ahmad was getting nervous. He expected to start the first round much more confidently. But we should not forget that this is only the beginning of the battle, and he is still ready to demonstrate all his strengths. In a few seconds, Brian saw too much blood above his head and got scared. In terms of combat sense and ability, Lee is ahead of his Japanese rivals. But that Japanese representative's power increased too quickly, probably because of additional tools. From the very beginning, the teacher was a traveler who was always leaving but always returning. Helen doesn't understand why a student was taken if the teacher doesn't have any Dharma tools to pass on. This battle is also a place to test the skills of Korean and Japanese ancestors. A battle watched by people around the world. Lady Pinakwa, in order to restore her family's power, wanted to show the image of a clan that would defeat its Japanese rivals. From the very beginning, Lee was only an assistant, but it turned out that he had no chance in this battle. However, at the moment when it seemed that everything was over, it turned out that this persistent guy was not going to accept his defeat. He almost lost consciousness after his opponent's attack, but he managed to withstand the blow. Of course, his condition now seems very serious. Perhaps the problem was a serious injury he received from the Ahmad. But does this really mean that the Korean Celestial lost the first battle? It is noticeable that he does not have as strong an attacking technique as his opponent. Nevertheless, he realizes that he cannot lose so easily. He has character and will fight to the last drop of blood. In response, the Ahmad just smiles, thinking that his opponent is wasting his time. There have always been levels in this game, and if your opponent is on a different level, it will be difficult for you to stop him. Young Master Lee has always had incredible potential and character, but now he is still not ready to fight the real masters. Although at the beginning of the fight it seemed that his defense was at a high level, but then he started having problems with endurance. He has a big heart and tried to continue the fight to the last, but his body refused to obey him. Thus, the Japanese delegation won the first battle, and Lee would have to be carried off the battlefield with the help of doctors. Helen thinks that Brian, on the contrary, should be happy about this situation because it will make him stand out even more. She looked at him and told him that he should try to hold out longer than Lee during the battle. If it plays beautifully and quickly, it will be much better, in which case it will also stand out. After a short pause, Brian replied that he would fight to the best of his ability and assured her that she would not be able to stand out against him. He is confident that he knows he will win this battle and he will be the best warrior. At first, Helen wanted to laugh at these words, but then she changed her mind. This guy is too confident. Maybe he is really strong. Brian will be the next to fight. He is already known to many people for killing Lady Pinakwa's favorite animal. Everyone was interested in watching this guy's actions and wanted to see what he was capable of. According to the rules, he has to fight against the previous winner. That is, against the Ahmad. This guy from Japan is smiling because he is sure that he will fight him again as a too weak opponent. He was surprised to see that Brian was not ready to defend himself because he had come here to attack. The Ahmad had never felt such a lightning-fast approach to him in his life, and he missed a very powerful punch to the jaw. It's always a pleasure to watch Brian's inner circle when he breaks stereotypes. Everyone always believes that a beginner without a master will not be able to fight on equal terms against a serious opponent, but today is a completely different story. No one understood what had just happened. Everyone was shocked and couldn't even string two words together. In any case, the judge officially announced that Mr. Brian won with an incredible handicap. People even began to worry about the Ahmad because he could faint due to blood loss, just like the Li. Oddly enough, Carol was unhappy with his actions because he completely forgot about defense and acted too aggressively. She also couldn't understand how Brian had learned about the fast movement technique. Christopher looked at his friend and explained to the girl that in his training, Master Brian looks like a bottomless bowl. At this point, Brian took another stimulant, purple acid, calcium, and vitamin D. It helped increase cell strength and blood production, which should help in the future. His performance must continue, but he must not forget about defense, because without defense, a warrior will sooner or later lose. Now he will have to fight against a new opponent, and it will not be an easy ride. This woman from Japan summoned huge iron warriors to her aid. It is done to avoid close combat with the Brian, so it respects his martial arts technique. It is noticeable that his first performance frightened future rivals, but they will not be afraid all the time. She had already seen him fight against the Ahmad, so she was able to analyze his fighting technique and prepare for it. This girl was sure that she had the advantage now and that it would all be over very quickly. That's why she was so surprised when Brian started attacking again. It looks like she's not the only one who can summon big monsters to help her. Her opponent mastered this technique a long time ago. We have already seen these huge wooden warriors fighting, and his puppets always come to the rescue in a difficult moment. He said that he wanted to finish this fight beautifully and activated the song technique. He wants his assistants to sing a battle song, which is a rather strange request. What happened next is hard to take seriously, because few people have ever seen a warrior singing songs during a battle. Even the Ents were shocked by their master's behavior. They did not know how to react. It turned out that they were not very good singers, so the wooden warriors decided to fight to the sound of this song. Their opponent did not know how to react to this. Her magic did not help stop their attacks at all. Although she summoned additional puppets, they were powerless against the tree's attacks. Brian was very pleased with the course of events. It was clear that he was in full control of this battle. All the spectators around were shocked, and you can understand them because Brian got his second victory in a row, and he did it instantly. He is not an experienced master and has been practicing martial arts for less than 2 years, so his result's incredible. He used only one technique in the entire battle, so his next opponent is unable to fully appreciate his strength and potential. These competitions are just a show to raise the authority of Lady Pinaqua. She probably hopes that he will become the same victim as Lee. But Brian is not going to play according to her script. He wants to become the main character in this play. Since the two Celestials from the Japanese side have lost, the next one to fight will be an incredible Celestial. When people saw Brian's next opponent, some were not just surprised but began to tremble with fear. It turns out that the shinobi is also involved in the affairs of purgatory, and today he is ready for a fierce battle. The difference in levels between a Celestial and an incredible Celestial is too great. Brian realized that this time he would have to fight an even stronger opponent, and it was noticeable that he was tense. He prepared to attack with the help of his Ents, but they didn't have time to do anything because they were attacked faster. It was such an instantaneous attack that the Ents had no chance to survive and stay alive. Now Brian will personally experience the difference between a Celestial and an incredible Celestial. Shinobi is a true professional in the world of professional killers, and to joke with him is to insult Satan. All you need to do is lose concentration for a few moments, and its sharp knives will slit your throat. The fight started almost a minute ago, and Brian still can't get his act together. He realizes that he must act very quickly and aggressively, but his opponent is too strong. Nevertheless, the Lord of the Sixth Garden must find the strength to adapt to the strengths and weaknesses of the opponent. He activated the technique of songs and turned to the heavenly forces for help. At the beginning of the battle, he almost lost his arm, which was enough to realize the power of the shinobi. Brian will have to come up with a strategy to win, and he can start by asking for help from the guanacas. This big brown bear was very unhappy to be left alone with a blue dog. That's why he looks too aggressive now and is ready to show his shinobi strength and beat the crap out of him. The bear is absolutely sure that the unknown incredible celestial being will not be able to do anything to him. In addition, his opponent's armor is made of gold, so he is too afraid of the power of fire. The brown bear tried to scare his opponent, but the shinobi doesn't know what fear is. Guanak started celebrating his victory too soon. He said he was going to make the final blow and put an end to it. At the last moment, Brian tried to stop him, but the bear would not listen to him because he wanted to take all the glory for himself. We can call this a good example of underestimating an opponent and what such a mistake leads to. Shinobi used the technique of manipulating the shape of the metal and took advantage of the bear's overconfidence. Because of his confidence in his abilities, the Guanak completely forgot about caution, and now it's time to pay for it. His gold began to melt from the fire and bind the bear even more, and now he needs cold energy to cool the metal. After hearing about cold energy, Brian quickly realized what he needed to do. A few seconds later, he released another spirit from his fan, a water blue head-eye dog. Finally, old friends met again, and now they can spend some time in the real world. The audience and reporters were pleased with the performance they were watching. In any case, the television figures will be incredible, because this battle will go down in history. The strength of this dog was enough to stop the attack on the brown bear. Of course, it is not difficult to guess that the shinobi was very angry because he was prevented from destroying the enemy. It is easy to see in his eyes that he is not going to give up because he considers defeat too humiliating. Although he looks quite tired, he might still have a few tricks left in him. Brian was ready to continue the battle when someone intervened. Now he is facing a very important person, the master of the sanctuary, Sandra. She said that they should end there, because the main goal of this battle is a peaceful way to resolve the conflict. She believes it would be wrong to risk the lives of soldiers and watch someone die. Of course, Brian was surprised. He was preparing for the hardest battle of his life, and at the most interesting moment, they are trying to stop it. Not only was he shocked, but his friends also did not understand what was happening. This means that he should not die because the shinobi is not part of the temple. Most likely, they concluded an agreement under which the Saikashu transferred the sanctuary. The Saikashu is a group of mercenaries that was founded during the era of war between the provinces. Their emblem is a raven with 3 legs. At this point, the Pinafore lady had to intervene, and she was also put in an unpleasant position. Realizing that Miss Sandra has decided that the student's life is more important than winning, they will do the same and admit defeat. Brian was shocked. He was a few strokes away from the coveted victory, and now they say he has to admit defeat. A lady came up to him and thanked him for his great performance. She thought it was amazing that he managed to make it to the 3rd battle. She admits that she had no idea he had such incredible skills and talents. But Brian understands that although she pretends to praise him, she is actually trying to insult him, and she does it loudly for everyone to hear. Brian said that if he had been warned, he would have made the show much more interesting, and the ladies didn't like those words. He realizes that she is very unhappy that he attracts too much attention from ordinary people. But he is also an ordinary man who became a celestial, so he understands perfectly well what ordinary people are thinking. After these words, the guy turned around and walked away. He said everything he wanted to say. The shinobi was watching his actions all this time. This guy was looking at Brian with hatred, but why? As Brian approached his seat, he saw Carol, and she told him that he was doing well and moved over so that he could sit down. The girl was as unhappy with what happened as he was, and both of them can be understood. At first, he thought she was not happy because of his personal actions, but she said he fought like a real warrior. In elimination shows, these guys are called the producer's choice, and regardless of their abilities, they will be promoted further. They're willing to do anything for this, and this guy had to show his best to earn a reputation, even if he would have lost. The lady does not want ordinary people to worship her, but she does not understand their nature at all. If we draw a parallel with football, it's like replacing a striker who is still very strong, and the public will support him less. Carol was supposed to come out for the next battle on the Korean side, but suddenly something like an earthquake started. Soon people began to panic because they saw a huge tsunami coming. Only a little later did they realize what was really going on. They were visited by people looking for traitors who had rebelled against the royal palace. No one could understand why they were here. It all happened too quickly and unexpectedly. Carol explained that these are the sons of the Dragon King of the Eastern Sea, with the eldest of them standing in the center. They say that they will not listen to excuses because they want to destroy all those who dare to deceive the Dragon King and the ruler of the Eastern Sea. Only fools can think that they can hide the location of the 7-pointed sword. They are not happy that someone thought they would not know that their treasure was being exchanged far from the main palace. Of course, ordinary people did not understand what the conversation was about. They do not understand celestials that deeply. The dragon warriors believe that even drowning the traitors would be too light a punishment. But if these traitors handed him a sword blade and began to apologize for what they had done, his father might forgive them. Beowulf and his assistants immediately prepared for a fierce battle. These guys are not used to apologizing. The dragon warriors are waiting for them to answer and make a manly decision, and meanwhile they take out their weapons. Realizing that they would not be able to reach an agreement peacefully, the dragon's warriors prepared to send them all to the seabed. We must admit that these warriors really look very scary, especially given the support of their dragons. An incredibly fierce and large-scale battle between 2 different worlds began. Ordinary people who came to watch the competition were unlucky because they found themselves in the middle of a real war. These people did not understand what was happening and tried to find salvation, but it was difficult to do. Brian quickly realized that he could use this opportunity to steal the blade. He saw the Beowulf fighting against the dragon warriors, and he always had a blade by his side. Brian was preparing for a quick mission, and it was at that moment that he realized the tsunami was unavoidable. In a few seconds, he, like many other ordinary people and soldiers, found themselves deep underwater. You have to remember that when you are deep underwater, you are in the world of dragons. Although the guy still hasn't found the blade, the resonance process has begun and the handle feels the blade at a distance. After a few minutes of active searching, he finally managed to seize the opportunity and find the sword. Brian was very happy. Now the main thing is to leave quickly and make sure no one sees it. Very quickly, he found the strength to get out of the water. It would have been dangerous to stay there any longer. But he was unable to grab onto the rock, so he soon found himself back underwater. If one of the parties to the conflict sees that he has a blade, he will be torn apart like a piece of steak. The sword immediately began to pull the guy to the seabed, which means he is in serious trouble if he does not have a life jacket. He needs to get out of the water very quickly, and perhaps the power of the sword can help with this issue. Only now he realizes that this is the purest and strongest energy he has ever felt. Does it really belong to the seven-pointed sword? Probably because this artifact was divided a long time ago, it began to emit so much energy. The most interesting thing is that this energy is beginning to be embodied in Brian, and he feels it perfectly. But there are also problems. This energy is too much for his body to handle. That is why he must release a large amount of this energy, and do it right now. Brian was surprised because when he swung his seven-pointed sword, a crack appeared in space. Now he started to get sucked in, as if he had created a black hole. Soon he found himself in some unknown space, not in another galaxy. Now the guy is trying to figure out where he is and what to do next. He has never seen anything like this in his life. It is beyond his understanding. He guessed that this imaginary space was formed by a seven-pointed sword. It was as if he had entered another dimension, just like when he passed through the gates of the White Bird Pavilion. He wondered if he started swinging his sword again, would he be able to get back to where he came from? But first he wanted to explore the place, and very quickly realized that he had problems with that. Some unknown force began to attack him. He did not expect this attack, and therefore suffered serious injuries. It turned out that someone was waiting for him here, and this enemy was approaching him to deliver another insidious blow. When he got closer to him, Brian realized that he was about to fight the shinobi again. It seems that after his defeat, he was stalking Brian all this time and following him. The shinobi began to speak to him in Japanese, but the Lord of the Sixth Garden does not know this language. Brian chose the perfect moment to use the plant, but the shinobi noticed it in time and blocked his actions. He believes that Brian was just lucky in their personal battle, and now it is clear that he is just a beginner. Brian has a strange base, an attribute of wood rarely found in the world of celestials. The shinobi plucked the plant to eat it, thinking it would give him extra strength, but it turned out to be quite the opposite. It looks like it was just a treacherous trap from Brian. He deliberately slipped poison to his enemy. The Japanese mercenary immediately began to feel incredible pain throughout his body and started screaming. If no one intervenes, there will be 2 corpses in this imaginary space. Brian smiled and said, "You have to be much more careful with plants you've never seen before." This is good advice, but now he has to think about his own health because blood is coming out of his mouth. He tried to get up and return to the real world, but he had too little strength left. He defeated his enemy, but now he cannot stand on his own. He had to call for help, and it's probably not hard to guess who he turned to. Yes, the Guanak came to save him again. This big brown bear turned into a man. Guanak said that if Brian takes his medication and starts practicing breathing exercises, he should be fine. But it was clear from the face of this kind bear that he was lying, which is why Brian asked him to tell the truth. It turned out that Dantian had been badly damaged. The situation was really critical, and we needed immediate help. Now it was clear why Brian felt his energy gradually leaving him. The shinobi had deliberately attacked his Dantan. If we do not interfere with this process, its energy will completely disappear, not only its strength, but also its life. This means that there is no other choice. We have to use a secret weapon, but the gorilla thinks it is too dangerous. He told his friend that this was not something he could easily and safely handle alone. The pearl he had received earlier contained the energy of the divine, or even the supreme level. In addition, it holds the incredible power of an immigrant who has not yet had time to become a full-fledged dragon. This object is imbued with the perseverance and determination of an emoji, and is ready to do anything to evolve into an adult dragon. But will Brian, who hasn't even lived 100 years, be able to cope with such a volume of strong energy? Guanak warned his friend that being swallowed up by this force could mean something much worse than death. He is sure that even Christopher would not have let Brian use this power. Brian knew it was too dangerous, but he had no choice, so he decided to take the risk and apologize to his friend. It turned out that he had called his friend because he was trying to use the pearl by controlling a closed mystical bamboo fan. Meanwhile, there was a lot of tension in the pavilion of Lady Pinafore. She ordered all her assistants to leave her alone immediately. This woman is in a bad mood today. She was so angry that she was trembling, and she kept saying that she wanted to tear him to pieces. She is angry about the attack of the dragon team because she believes they had no right to attack them just because they are on their territory. All this happened only because of the rumors about the flute, and these thoughts do not give the Pinakwa lady peace of mind. She doesn't understand why she helped them if she was stabbed in the back anyway. In any case, the lady is sure that the only one who will suffer losses after this situation will be the dragon's butler, and she will do everything to ensure that. But she also recalled that the dragon team had talked about other treasures besides the seven-pointed sword. Of course, the king of the dragons of the Eastern Sea would not give up his own life for a lie, so they must know something. Now we need to understand where these small blue lizards heard about something like this. She used to think that she could trust the House of Dragons, but now the situation is changing very quickly, and she needs to be constantly ready for it. Her plan was simple. She wanted to make Helen a new hero, but nothing came of it. However, it's not time to be discouraged yet, because thanks to Christopher, all is not lost and we should look forward to new opportunities. Almost everyone on national television is talking about the new hero who saved the country. Lady Pinakwa knows about it, and she is sure that soon the entire Eastern Sea will bow before her. Now back to the main character. After a long sleep, he finally opened his eyes and tried to get up. Brian felt his head hurt and tried to understand what had happened and how long he had been unconscious. Apparently, his Dantian recovered very quickly, but it doesn't matter now because he has grown horns. He did not expect such a plot twist at all. These horns resemble animal horns. In addition, he immediately felt that his senses had become so sharpened that he could feel the temperature of the environment. His body has also become incredibly clean. Perhaps all this is a side effect of that pearl. Judging by this house, his clothes, and the state of his body, someone has been taking care of him all this time. Brian immediately began to think that it was the Guanak who had been doing it all along, because he was the only one who was there at the last moment. He doesn't know what this place is. The last thing he remembers is using a mystical bamboo fan, absorbing the pearl and creating a barrier. Of course, for this he had to call his friend for help, and he probably stayed with him and took care of him all this time. A little while later, Brian found the strength to stand up and started calling out to the Guanak very loudly. He took a few steps and went outside, and when he saw the forest, he was shocked because he did not understand how it was possible. It seems as if he really created a barrier of plants around it. But how much time has passed that they have grown so much? When he looked at the other side of the territory, he saw that there were not plants everywhere. These look like some recent footprints. Maybe the Guanak was fighting with someone while he was resting. But wherever this funny bear is now, the smell of fire can still be felt around. Brian felt that someone was near him and trying to get away from him, and a game of hide and seek immediately began. The guy realized that it could be important, so he tried to show his maximum speed. But when he ran even closer, he was surprised to realize that he was in a sanctuary. It seems that a brown bear used to live here, although he never seemed to talk about it. Soon the celestial being saw a huge head in front of him. Recently, this dog has grown to a huge size, but for some reason he treats Brian too aggressively. Perhaps all this happened because he grew horns, and now he is part of nature. In any case, the blue heady is ready to attack and cut off his head, so you have to act quickly. At the last moment before the dog attacked, Brian activated something similar to a plant defense, a technique he had used before. The blue dog's attack was incredibly powerful, but even this was not enough to break through the defense. A little while later, Brian finally realized his new skills and decided to show them to the Hedda. He turned into a huge green dragon and told the dog that it was not nice to attack his master. The dog immediately began to tremble because he realized that he was just a small rat against the dragon. He fell on his back and began to pray to the dog god in the hope of staying alive. After that, Brian turned back into a human because his dog was too small and he had to show strength to make it obey him. Now they are finally friends and have nothing to fear. Even though Brian swallowed the pearl, his abilities have not changed much. Perhaps this happened because a lot of his energy was spent on restoring his inner strength. A little later, the boy saw things that belonged to him. Probably the brown bear had saved them for him. Inside his treasure pouch, he saw something. It seems he hadn't had this item before. He doesn't know what the text is. It's written in Japanese, and it might belong to a shinobi. He has been very lucky lately, first finding a book of runes, then a mystical bamboo fan, and now a hidden shinobi scroll. According to what the Guanaku said during the battle, there are few shinobi warriors who wear the emblem of the enemy with 3 legs, also called Sikashu. It seems as if this scroll was written by the followers of a Japanese crow with 3 legs. Brian also found the clothes worn by the shinobi, and the bear probably decided to leave it as a souvenir as well. The guy quickly remembered that these clothes can change shape using the energy of gold, so it could be useful. Brian immediately put on this suit because it can increase his level of protection. A little later, he heard strange sounds coming from the side where the traces of the battle remained. He approached the area and realized that he was not alone. There is some kind of battle going on there, as if these guys are trying to break the barrier. It was immediately obvious that they had blue skin, large bodies, and red hair. But where did they come from? And of course, Brian couldn't help but notice the mace they were using to try to break this barrier. This weapon looks the same as the mace given to him by the brown bear. These guys are also wearing strange helmets. Only now, Brian was able to realize that he was facing a real goblin, and they might meet for the first time. He did not expect to find goblins in the space of the seven-pointed sword, as it was probably their territory. That's why they are trying to break the barrier, because Brian has entered their land. Soon they will execute their plan, so he has to do something to stop them. Brian has never had any problems with interesting ideas, and he is a great strategist even in critical situations. Soon he appeared in front of them, greeted them, and told them his name. The goblins were surprised by his impudence, especially after he demanded to see the boss. Very soon, Brian was able to meet the goblin boss personally. His name was Joseph. The goblin boss immediately started talking aggressively to the unknown guy, saying that he wanted to see the owner of the sword immediately. They know that this place is difficult to get into. Only the owner of the sword can open this space and enter it. If Brian doesn't answer him now, Joseph will cut off his head. But why would he want to own a sword? The other goblins think that there is nothing wrong with telling this guy the truth. That is why Joseph said that he has long dreamed of taking revenge on the owner of the sword. The king promised that he would soon come with a sword that would be worthy of becoming their leader's mate, but this man never came. All the details of this story are unknown, but it is clear that a new owner of the seven-pointed sword was to come here. The promise was never fulfilled, and the former leader was seriously upset and soon fell ill. That is why goblins believe that the owner of the sword should be severely punished. They plan to take him to the leader so that he can cut off his head with his own hands. Brian listened carefully to the story and decided to change the topic of conversation. He started asking questions about the brown bear. It turned out that the goblins had ordered him to get out of here, but he didn't listen to their advice. So the leader came and personally grabbed him. Although Brian was very angry that his friend had been captured, he immediately calmed down because now he knew where the Gwanak was, so he could save him. After that, the guy calmly said that he was the new owner of the seven-pointed sword, so he was now the boss of the goblins. Of course, these guys didn't believe him and said that he would die from the first blow, as he was not worthy to be the owner of such a sword. They called him too weak a sissy, didn't even look like he'd ever studied martial arts, and of course they said he looked like a woman. They wanted to make him take off his pants to confirm his gender. It was too much. In any case, if he can open the passage, he can get out of here. And if Brian doesn't interfere, they'll let him live. These sons of bitches have no idea who they're dealing with. And now he's going to show them what the Lord of the Sixth Garden is capable of. We shouldn't have underestimated him, because only with the help of a fan can he summon a real monster to help him. As soon as the blue dog appeared, he immediately spat an unknown red liquid at the goblins. They could not understand anything, immediately began to panic, and immediately ran back. It was a good idea, but it should have been done much earlier, because now it was too late. If they don't get up and start talking to him right now, he will make the dogs spit red bean porridge at them again. Hearing this, the goblins began to panic even more than before, as if they hated red beans. All they could do was to fall to their knees and beg him to stop and calm down, ready to obey all his orders. It's time for a conversation, and Brian wants to know if they really have such a strong and powerful leader.
It turned out to be true, and he was probably the only one who could defeat the Gwanak.
Maybe they know some other information, and if he finds out that they are hiding something, he will make them suffer a lot. The goblins told us that their leader also has a shield made of golden gourd. But what power does it have? It turned out that there was no point in asking these questions because the leader felt that his people were in danger and came to their rescue. Now we will see what the strongest goblin warrior is capable of and meet him personally. It turned out that the leader of the goblins was a woman. Although she was also a goblin, she looked much better than the men. The chief's name is Nancy. She came to see what was going on here and realized that her people were real fools. She's ready to punish them and lock them up for 10 years. Yes, this woman is very cruel. By the way, the goblins have a rather interesting prison. She imprisoned them in her flask like a genie. Brian was immediately curious about Nancy's strength, and at first she had to try the red bean porridge. He thought that she would be as afraid of this attack as her soldiers, but this woman looked very calm. At the last moment, she realized what was about to happen. but it was enough to dodge it. Such obvious attacks do not frighten Nancy at all. Perhaps her soldiers are too stupid, but she is completely different. She summoned some unknown goblin spirits to help her and immediately prepared to attack. Brian was surprised, but still thought it was not a very threatening ability. He felt he could easily defend himself. Of course, the goblin leader is very strong, and in order to defeat her, you will have to do your best. Brian is ready to use all his strengths to taste victory in this battle. He is not going to fight alone either. He has enough spirits to help him in this battle. A very interesting confrontation awaits us. The goblin leader must win and defend her territory. But today she will meet something very strong. These creatures from another world have come to win. Now Brian and Nancy are like captains leading their brave army. I would like to see a battle between them and see what this woman with red hair is capable of. She looked like she was completely happy with what was happening, and Nancy probably hadn't had this much fun in a long time. In this territory, goblins have already defeated all their enemies, so they rarely have to fight. Brian quickly realized that you can't win with the first attack. It's not that simple. It was then that he decided to recall a conversation with a brown bear when they talked about goblins. Theoretically, goblins can create anything with this wood, although this is not entirely fair. Yes, this is their main ability, to embody images from their brains, but goblins don't think much about their fantasies. They can't imagine something specific but act instinctively. In addition, from the moment they are born, goblins already have quite strong physical strength and a strong body. If they had a little more intelligence, they could have conquered the whole world. But in reality, things are not so perfect, which is why they have only conquered their own territory. Of course, the leader is completely different from the others. Her level of imagination is much higher, so her capabilities are also better. In other words, Nancy is on a completely different level. Hethy is still coping, but Brian cannot get close to the leader. He needs to come up with a plan to win. Maybe he needs to use a protective barrier. Because he was so busy thinking about strategy, the guy forgot about defense, and Nancy took advantage of it. She is surprised that he finds time to be distracted from the fierce battle. Now Brian is trying to concentrate again. The main thing is to use his strengths to not lose this battle. He decided to use the shinobi technique to break the distance between them. It was a perfect decision made in a critical situation. It seems that Nancy is enjoying herself during the battle. She probably hasn't experienced such feelings for a long time. The leader ordered her goblins to attack without stopping. With their pressure and physical properties, they must pinch the enemy. Brian immediately felt their physical attributes, and every minute of this confrontation was becoming more difficult for him. If he does not immediately come up with a plan to win, he will be forced to accept his defeat. Nancy laughs right in his face. When they started fighting, she expected much more from him. During this time, she had already gotten hungry, so she apologized to the guy and said it was time to end it. Of course, if he kneels down and begs for rescue, she might consider letting him live. As soon as he starts screaming, she can lock him in her vest, just like that bear. She hopes that now he will finally start screaming, because this woman probably doesn't know who Brian is very well. He does not understand what is so funny about this story, because the real fun will come later. It turned out that his favorite Ents were behind him. These wooden guys hadn't helped their master for a long time. If you look closely, you will realize that they came here with special gifts for the goblins. Finally, Mrs. Nancy has lost her smile, and she probably doesn't find it as funny as she used to. Red bean porridge is the Achilles heel of goblins, and now even we will know about it. Nancy began to tremble visibly and could not think of what to do. She could only scream. It was quite a comical situation. She was waiting for Brian to start screaming that he was trapped. But at the last moment, she started screaming herself, and thus fell into her own trap. Taking this vase, Brian asked his friend the bear to come outside immediately. The brown bear must have been dreaming of being free for a long time. He knew that his friend would save his life. This reunion is very nice to watch, although the bear thinks that Brian deserves to be punished. Because of him, the Gwanak was forced to play the role of a house pet, and he stayed there for more than 100 days. Brian went up to Nancy and asked her team where the seven-pointed sword was now. She looked at him carefully and said that he was too small. His shoulders were narrow, and everything was too small. The guy started shouting that size doesn't matter, although it was obvious that he was very pleased to hear it. After that, Nancy stood up and agreed that size doesn't matter at all. And my mother always said the same thing, even though she always thought it was nonsense. She recognized that Brian had won. He seems to be quite intelligent and a nice guy, so she made a decision and wants him to be her husband. Not only was Brian shocked by this proposal, but the brown bear thought he heard it too. Brian asked his friend what was happening now, because he was losing touch with reality. It was as if he hadn't listened to the whole story the goblin was telling. Suddenly, Brian remembered that the goblin had told them that a man with a sword would come to them and would be worthy of becoming a match for their leader. This person never came at the right time, but it seems as if the goblins kept waiting for him. Now everything is coming together perfectly. Brian has come with a 7-pointed sword, meaning he has to marry Nancy. Of course, now he cannot believe that this situation happened to him. The bear tried to calm him down and told him that he would take care of the ceremony, but this did not calm the boy down. He said that the person who was supposed to come with this sword had died a long time ago, and that Nancy was the daughter of the previous leader. But she thinks differently and wants him to really become her husband. Brian tried to calm himself down and began to write about the location of the sword. If she doesn't tell him this information soon, he will make her eat only red bean porridge until she explodes. He believed that this plan would work sooner or later because he knew how much the goblins hated red beans. But Nancy said they could do whatever they wanted to her, but she would not give him the sword until they had 3 children. After these words, the woman fainted, as if Brian was using a completely wrong method. I explained to my friend that goblins are very stubborn creatures, and it is difficult to come to an agreement with them. He still can't understand if there is a reason why Brian can't marry this beautiful woman. It seems that the goblins were ambushed here because only the young ones remained, which is probably why they do not realize their power. Even the golden gourd used by the chief is a treasure of the highest rank. If they really have such an object, then this clan must have a very interesting history. Since Brian is a celestial, he can live for several hundred years. But in 100 years, the goblins will become strong and he will have problems. Although it can happen at any time, even tomorrow, the goblins can never be underestimated. Instead of intimidating them, it was decided to try to bend them to our will. But how to do it right? Soon Nancy regained consciousness. She quickly realized that she was tied up. At first, the woman began to panic, thinking that Brian was up to no good. But then I was very surprised when I saw something very tasty in front of me. It was at this moment that Brian appeared next to her with his friend Gwanak. Nancy kept screaming and said that no matter what he did to her, she would not say anything until they were married. But this did not bother Brian at all. He said he did not think about it at all and was going to eat a delicious lunch. After these words, he did not pay any attention to the goblin at all and enjoyed his meal. It quickly became apparent how difficult it was for Nancy to watch. Brian constantly made it clear that he really enjoyed this dish. He loves the combination of soybean paste and rice cakes. Soon Nancy started shouting that she wanted to try this delicious dish too. She almost didn't stop and kept screaming. And in a few seconds, the guy decided to satisfy her hunger, partially. The chief liked it very much, but she was hardly satisfied after eating only 1 pie. Soon Nancy began to beg for another portion, and she started screaming again. It's not hard to guess that this is exactly what Brian was expecting, and it would have been nice to see his expression. After that, he took out a full plate of food and poured it all into his mouth. Nancy immediately started screaming and calling him a horrible person. She wasn't going to give up on the marriage because of that. It turned out that there were 2 more rice cakes left. Probably Brian had left them for dessert. Nancy wanted to taste it so badly that she was ready to forget about her 3 children. Just 1 son and daughter would be enough. The ram continued to ignore her words. He ate 1 pie, so only the last one remained. At that moment, it was very difficult to watch Nancy's reaction. She was ready for only 1 daughter. But it didn't work on Brian at all. He calmly took out the pie and ate it. Nancy had a hysteria. It was the last straw for her character. She started crying and begging to become his wife, probably ready to give up her children. This is exactly what the guy expected. He agrees to marry her, but only when he wants to, because now he can't do it. I must admit that he is too cruel. A little later, he said that he is ready to get married only in 100 years, but he thinks that is not long. After saying that, he held up corn cakes to her face and said that he would tell her how to cook and grow the necessary ingredients. This wedding gift is perfect for Nancy. She said she would agree to anything. Thus, all the conditions were very quickly discussed, and the Celestial very quickly found a common language with the goblin. Nancy took out a large chest and said that it was a very beautiful object that she had received from her mother. After that, she asked the brothers to wait a few minutes until she found what she needed. When she got what she was looking for, Brian could not understand for a long time what she was offering him. This is a pine cone, probably referring to the pine cone from the fairy tale about a good old man who met a goblin and exchanged the pine cone for treasure. It felt like real flesh to the touch, but Nancy kept saying that it was a very useful thing. According to rumors, the main character of this fairy tale was a famous singer of the time. Usually goblins always give people what they want so badly but in return, they take away their greatest talent. In this regard, goblins are very honest in their desires. They have invented a method that allows them to give and take even non-material things like talent. People wouldn't give something like this away so easily. And of course, no one wants to give away their talent. These cones are proof that a person who has faced difficult situations has decided to exchange their talent for help. The bear assured him that it was a very important thing and ordered him to stick it to himself. Her grandmother told Nancy that she had received these items long before she came to this continent. It was time to study history because the bear also began to talk about these ancient times. He also told us that the owner of these cones was a doctor who was the subject of many legends. He was known for his skills in making medicines and his knowledge of acupuncture. When he was traveling around the world, a powerful man forced him to treat a serious illness and then grabbed the doctor and imprisoned him. In fear for his family, he gave his cone to his grandmother in exchange for her hiding them. But who was the doctor? So far, there is no answer to this. But there is a story about the owner of another big shot. He was a professional martial artist and an excellent horseman, but his vanity ruined him. He took his beloved woman to the battlefield, and when the situation got out of hand, he gave his cone to have his woman rescued. It is strange that he even took his beloved woman with him to the battle. It was the first and last time he sacrificed something for another. This story characterizes the history of this warrior well, and Brian should learn from such stories. After the conversation was over, Nancy stood up and said she was ready to begin. Brian and Gwanak didn't mind, although they couldn't understand what she was saying. At first, they thought it didn't matter. But when Nancy picked up a huge mace, they realized that this was not exactly according to plan. Brian tried to ask her what she was going to do, but it was too late. She hit the guy on the head with all her might, but he didn't feel much pain at all. This was the very process that Nancy talked about a lot, and now a lot has become clear. Although Brian doesn't feel any changes at all, the girl said that when the time comes, he will be able to use his talent. Now, she doesn't want to waste time on idle talk. She wants to eat everything left. When she left Brian with the very sword he had come to get. Usually treasures of this level have self-knowledge, but this sword looks too confident, even though it is an inanimate object. The bear noticed that the attribute of the Brian's base is wood, so the boy will have to work hard. Each element has opposites, so the seven-pointed sword has the opposite attribute of metal for the Brian. Of course, first you have to try to use this sword, although the result may not be expected. I picked up this weapon and immediately felt incredible tension in every cell of my body. It was very difficult for him to restrain himself from letting go of the sword. The governor warned him about it. Anyone who knows this guy well understands that he is not going to give up halfway. After a while, even the brown bear realized that this guy was starting to change. Usually you can see a smile on his face, but now he looks incredibly aggressive. Finally, the sword calmed down and accepted its new owner, as Brian had to prove his strength. Of course, the Gwanak had heard stories about people who had become celestials and could conquer an opponent with their willpower alone. But he did not expect that Brian would be able to conquer the ultimate sword, which already characterizes him as a very talented warrior. Brian also did not expect that he would have the desire and confidence to conquer the sword. Is it really a talent of a martial artist? The guy smiled and said that now it was time for them to go back, because they had already spent too much time here. After spending a long time in the imaginary space of the sword, the heroes were happy to return to ordinary civilization. Now they can enjoy what they were so used to before. Brian and Gwanak decided to stop at an internet cafe to have some fun and relax. From the beginning, they planned to go straight to Guanakshan, but the driver said they had too much energy, so he would have to drop them off halfway. After the first use of the sword, Brian was full of energy, but then he felt that he had almost no energy left. In the battle with this girl, he spent a lot of energy, so I had to stop in a town not far from this mountain. Nancy wanted to go with him because she has a great sense of responsibility, but Brian refused to help and promised to return. More than 7 months have passed since the battle in the Eastern Sea, but people do not stop talking about it. This is probably due to the unexpected invasion of the sons of the Dragon King of the Eastern Sea, which is rare to see. Many people began to accuse the dragon's butler of interfering in their own affairs, but the dragons did not agree. A month later, the Dragon King began to justify the actions of his sons, and then he apologized and said he was wrong. Of course, both sides of the conflict knew that these were just empty words. Also, no one could understand why the dragons of the other seas did not comment on the situation or show their position. Surely they are not on the side of the Eastern Sea at all. It seems as if they are ignoring these dragons. Although the three Dragon Kings do not communicate well with each other, they still always unite when they encounter humans or celestials. It is illogical that they are leaving this situation without their attention this time, as if they are to blame for it. According to rumors, the Beowulf informed the Masters that he would stay on the Korean peninsula and would certainly take part in the war in the East Sea. This probably has something to do with the oath he took many years ago. This warrior is strong enough to drown out the resonance of a 7-pointed sword with one blow. Brian must be very careful because this master will be looking for this sword. Now the Eastern Sea is completely cornered. People talk about them too badly. After the time for internet games was over, Brian said they should go to Mount Guanasan. He is now considered either to have been with him or to have died. So if he returns unharmed, it will raise suspicions. That's why he wants to calmly observe the situation from the outside, and he has a peach tree to take care of. The bear also wants to get to this mountain to check the condition of its main body. He has been worried for a long time that he has stopped feeling the energy of his body since they entered the place where the goblins live. He hoped that the connection with the body would be restored when they returned, but something must have happened to this body. So it turns out that more than 7 months have passed since the connection with his body was broken, which is very important. But he only said this now. Brian immediately grabbed his friend and told him that they had to go to Mount Guanasan immediately. The decision was made in a second, and soon they were both on their way. When they got closer to the peach tree, they saw that huge bees now lived there. It is still difficult to understand how these insects were able to penetrate the peach tree barrier. It doesn't look like the barrier has become weaker. Perhaps it wasn't the bees that broke through the barrier, but the tree that called the bees. Gwanak saw a pile of leaves in front of a tree, which usually never happens here. He began to rummage through the letter and saw something shocking, i.e., his own body. Then even stranger things began to happen. Because at that moment, the bees became 100 times bigger than I usually am. It is unclear what caused these insects to mutate, but we need to act very quickly and aggressively. In order to protect his own life, Brian used the shinobi technique, a skill he had already mastered quite well. This should be enough to stop these huge mutants. The shinobi technique attacked the bees very quickly and forced them to retreat. On the one hand, this technique really helped a lot, but the problem is that there are too many bees. While some insects retreated, others continued to attack. Even iron cannons cannot cope with so many opponents, so we need to come up with something urgently. In critical moments, the Gwanak always feels confident, which is probably why he is a legendary deity. Its fire was enough to roast these huge bees, and they are easy to kill with fire. He probably didn't think at all that he could hit a peach tree and a bee nest with his fire. If this really happens, it will lead to huge problems, and it will turn out that he has only made things worse with his help. We need to find a safe way to stop the dangerous bees very quickly and not hurt the tree. Looking at these insects more closely, Brian couldn't understand why they were dying if they had no wounds. Finally, the guy realized what he had to do. He called his friend and told him to stop immediately. After that, Brian started throwing some strange objects at the tree. In this way, he activated the protective barrier and at the last moment, together with the bear, managed to go beyond the barrier. Gwanak still can't understand where these huge bees came from. There is a story in which the Golden Queen of Bees grew something called a bonga on a mountain. The Golden Queen of Bees is a sorceress in Chinese mythology, also known as the inventor of the elixir of immortality. The bear said that it had been too long since they had seen her last, and there was no reason for her to show up now. The peach tree is a symbol of youth and immortality, a tree of life, so there is a reason. Perhaps there were still bees alive from that moment. They could have lived elsewhere, but then they came when they smelled the peach tree. This theory does have a right to life, but it is not important now. The guys have already figured out how to get rid of the bees, and there is no more smoke after the fire, so they can go inside. It has to be done very carefully because they may still be in danger. Fortunately, they are very lucky that there are no more problems with the bees, which means that they can taste their juicy honey. Gwanak immediately explained to his friend that this was not classic honey, it was full of yang energy. If you eat this delicious delicacy, your whole body will be filled with strength. Even though this honey was made on a peach tree, it has the smell of ordinary honey. Brian was very attentive and found the honeycomb with larvae. If they are still alive, they need to be moved to another place. There are a lot of useful substances here that can help in future progress, and I'm very curious what effect this honey will have. Having tasted this delicacy, the boy's body immediately absorbed royal jelly. His head began to clear, and his body was filled with strength. Now his ability to progress has increased, but it turned out that the honey was not sweet at all. The brown bear was very attentive and noticed that his friend's head started to glow, so all that was left was to add a halo. His horns were also in place, and it was hard to get used to this new attribute. The guanac had never seen these horns before, so when he saw them for the first time, he almost died of fear. Brian explained that this happened after he swallowed a pearl, but the bear said that this one could not be related. A person will not turn into a bear if he eats beef soup for 3 days, so there must be another reason. Brian also said that something else strange appeared on his body. He noticed it when he was changing clothes. The guy thinks it could have happened because of the dragon pearl, but it's not that simple. Dragons are creatures born from water, but after years of training they are reborn. The natural strength of a person is completely different, and people use other methods to become stronger. Brian became a dragon, even though he was a human before, and it's quite difficult to comment on that. Guanac looked at his friend and said that he had become a real monster, although it was not obvious at first glance. Now it will be very difficult for him to live like an ordinary person. If he could turn back the clock, he would not touch this pearl. Nevertheless, the dragon's horns and scales have their advantages, and it is immediately noticeable that as soon as the boy ate the honey, the parts of the dragon in his body grew. If he were an ordinary person, he would not get any special advantages, and maybe one day he will even become a real dragon. Brian looked at the honey again and thought that he needed to eat more of it to get the effect. If you leave the larvae alone, they will eventually grow up on their own, and when this happens, you can collect more royal jelly. While these larvae are growing, Brian can spend his time learning new techniques. He was very lucky because the first elixir he ingested was a gongxing extract, meaning it had the energy of nature inside it. At the beginning, Brian had an unclear foundation, but after learning the techniques, it changed. Because of this, he had to absorb elixirs that have the attributes of a tree, and this was not very effective. So, if he starts learning techniques with other attributes, he may be able to absorb other elixirs. It's a pretty interesting idea, but first we need to find other techniques, which shouldn't be a problem. During this time, Brian has already found a lot of valuable information that he now has time to study. If they will have to hide for some time anyway, it is better to use these opportunities to train. Brian decided that the shinobi technique would be the perfect place to start, and it would be easier to get started. He already has 3 items that have the attribute of metal, including a 7-pointed sword. Everything seemed to be going well, but it turned out that Brian was upset about the jade bowl because he couldn't get it. These thoughts have not left his mind for a long time, so he thinks about a potential way to contact Christopher. The brown bear doesn't understand why the boy is worried about this and why he failed to get the jade bowl. He asked his friend to learn to look at the world from a broader perspective so as not to worry about small problems. He knows what a flute is, and he realizes that even if he gets this item, all the items will not be solved in a few seconds. That is why he explains to Brian that there is no need to risk his own life for the sake of other lesser-known people. He does not consider Christopher to be a stranger to him. They have already gone through some difficulties together and become close friends. Guanac believes that Brian is still too young and should act carefully. You can always find someone who will do everything for you. From these words, Brian immediately realized that this bear knew how to help him, but he had been silent about it all this time. The bear believes that even if his friend gets this treasured flute, he will still not use it and will give it to Christopher. But Brian began to convince him that this was not the case at all, and he wanted to keep the flute. He doesn't understand why he should give such an important and precious object to another when he can use the flute against the Dragon Palace. After a short debate, the bear agreed to help, and Brian was incredibly happy to hear that. The master the bear wants Brian to meet is called Gene, and he has been working with his older sister and nephew for a long time. After that, the bear told him that they had to get to Mount Kavul, which is not well known, so Brian had never heard of it. Of course, there is a small problem. This mountain is located in North Korea, which means that we will have to go a long way. The bear also said that his sister had no name. He, as the spirit of the mountain, inherited her name, but his sister is not a spirit. Then he began to talk about his nephew. His name is Wang, and he is a very respectable person. Together with Lady Pinakwa, he was one of the 3 leaders who ruled the entire Korean peninsula. Soon after, the friends traveled to North Korea. Brian never thought he would end up here. But when he saw this mountain with his own eyes, he realized that it really deserved to be called the sacred mountain of his people. At this point, the Guanac took on the form of a human again, accompanying his friend and making sure he didn't get into trouble. Soon they finally reached the place they had been looking for so long, and it was really beautiful. The huge stone statues began to talk and said they were not ready to let uninvited guests in. At that moment, the Guanac began to speak. He said to tell the water to pass on to his sister that a brown bear had come from Mount Guanacsan. The statue asked to wait for a while, but the bear ordered it to move faster and take off its disguise. All this time, Brian thought his friend was just an ordinary bear, but now this guy looks incredibly noble. A little later, he started thinking about disguises, but only now he became interested in his friend's words. Strangely enough, despite the heavy rain, there were still many people outside in this village. It seems as if they enjoy the rain, as they realize that it is just a part of nature. It was especially nice to watch the children playing and trying to catch up with each other. This village is hidden behind a barrier, which is why Brian began to think that all the people here are celestials. The brown bear immediately explained that this was not entirely true. Before they hid themselves from the world, they accepted those who wanted to stay. One of the conditions was that all rights to life and death would belong to the Wang, and these people are the descendants of the earliest settlers. Soon the two guests were met by young warriors, and they immediately greeted the brown bear. Gwanak was quite relaxed and confident, and he began to ask them about his sister's whereabouts. He was told that she was already waiting for him and began to ask questions about the person who came with him. Gwanak said that he was his servant and could be trusted, so after these words they were calmly invited to the settlement. People here do not pay attention to the weather conditions. They enjoy life at any time. It turned out that the brown bear's sister was in a cave at the very end of the village. Brian couldn't understand why she should live here when there was a big, beautiful palace not far away. Soon she came out to meet them, and it turned out to be a rather young and beautiful girl named Lisa. First of all, she thanked her assistants because they were very busy, but they brought her younger brother to her anyway. The assistants replied that it was just their job, and soon they said they had new tasks and left. The sister and brother have not seen each other for a long time, and you don't have to be too attentive to realize how similar they are. Probably, if they both turn into a bear, it will be almost impossible to distinguish them from each other. After a short pause, Lisa finally began to act like a real sister and hugged and kissed her brother. She said that he hadn't come to visit her for too long, and that he should be punished for that. In any case, he has come a long way to meet again, so now it's time for a good rest. After this hug, the Gwanak immediately fell asleep, and Brian thought that his sister had done something bad to him and grabbed for his weapon. But Lisa immediately reassured him and explained that she had